for the Health Commission. Bill Rosendahl, our president, is running a little late, so we're going to start the meeting, and then he will take over chairing as soon as he arrives. Okay, if the clerk can call the roll, please. Oh, and I'm going to ask each commissioner when you speak if you can stand up so that our audio person knows to turn up your microphone. That would be great.
Commissioner Andres Taylor.
Here.
Arriola.
Here.
Avila.
Here.
Esparza.
Here.
Griffith.
Here.
Hisarick.
Here.
Jaques.
Here.
Jimenez. Mandel.
Here.
Roca. Rosendahl. Shannon.
Here.
Sharp.
Here.
Vic.
Here.
Okay, if I could get a motion for the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, November 16th, 2015. Okay, we have a move and second. All in favor of approving the minutes from November 16th, please say aye. Aye. Any objections? Great. Okay, now we're going to move along to public comment. So if you have a public comment for a non-agendized item or for one that is agendized but you need to leave, I think we're going to make a little exception here. And I know I'm going to call Stephen David Simon, who is with the City of Los Angeles Department of Disabilities.
Thank you, Madam Vice President and Commissioners. I appreciate your indulgence. I'd like to make a few comments on an item on the agenda, which is number 8, the Housing for Health motion. I'm the Executive Director of the City of Los Angeles Department on Disability. I can tell you at the DOD, we are very proud of the work we do trying to link community members and constituents to various services for people with disabilities all across the city and county. One of the hardest things to do is for us to get people placed into housing. It's been extraordinarily difficult combining health issues, particularly mental health issues, mobility issues, and housing. That said, I've had the opportunity to work with the county program being referenced here and ensure that some of our clients got placed. It's extraordinarily important for us to have these kind of partnerships. So I will tell you, I think this resolution essentially says to support the concept. I will gladly put my department at your disposal if you decide to support this in concept to help implement it in a way that really is helpful for our communities. So again, the Department on Disability, myself speaking as an individual, is extremely supportive of this concept of this type of program existing, and whether the city needs to just link to it, help support it in other ways, whatever you can do is a plus for the disability community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a non-agendized item? Okay, if you could line up, please. We'll have 2 minutes each.
Hello, good evening. I just want to say my name is Adam Cohen. I am a doctoral student at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, got my master's in public health, bachelor's in public health. I am so happy that we have a City Health Commission. I want to just mention a few health issues that I think are of importance for the City of LA. Tuberculosis, number 1 for me. The incidence rate is 7 per 100,000, which doesn't seem that high, but it's twice as high as the national average. HIV, especially in Los Angeles City, there are 27,000 individuals living with HIV. For STDs in LA County, between 2009 and 2013, chlamydia increased 10%, gonorrhea 47%, and syphilis 44%. For measles, we have about 29 cases reported in the past 2 years. Meningitis, we have 11 cases in 2014, 10 cases in 2015. Pertussis, we have 435 lab confirmed and 386 suspect as of July from the 2015. And for poverty, 1 in 5 are currently living in poverty in the city of Los Angeles, 300,000 people. I just want to remind also, because I'm excited about the Health Commission, that the purpose of the commission is to attend meetings and hearings and working sessions, other events that address health policies, that once a year publish a health services plan that discusses the health needs of the City of LA and goals for improving the health of the City of LA. Twice per year, prepare and present a report to the LA City Council to evaluate the progress towards meeting its health goals. And lastly, once per year, review a representative sample of LA County Health Service contracts which provide services to the City of LA. And I'm looking forward to all of those things, and thank you for agreeing to be part of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next.
It is said that a local government is to have unconstitutional policies that benefit the public. Unfortunately, the crisis and the war on homelessness is a real problem, a crisis that doesn't impact the health community, but it impacts our society as a whole. From the fucked up system that someone created, a system that fails to provide adequate housing for those who are at a disadvantage, African Americans, Hispanic, and those in our population known as Asian, who squander the streets of Los Angeles on a daily basis that you abusive people walk by and shun. Shun. So when it fails to a situation that a society cannot train its employees, the indifferences to do the obvious, the need and the want for those who are impaired, who are homeless, I say to you for the record that this failure to train is likely the result of bad performance of employees making significant wrong decisions that impact the community that are on your street today. My name isn't Teddy Roosevelt, but there is a solution. That by Lyndon Rouge, who said, create a national credit for the productivity, employment, to gain housing, to live off the streets, off a public sidewalk, not to be discriminated because of your disability to live on a fucking street and a fucking sidewalk. Very harsh words, but not indiscriminately. These words are to enforce and implement idea to take action now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Evening, Commissioners. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Vicki Englert. I'm a software developer. I own a small consultancy locally. I'm not as versed in health issues per se, but data. I work as the Health Data Ambassador for the state's program Free the Data, which is a partnership between the California Healthcare Foundation and the California Health and Human Services Agency. Been working with them for about 6 months, and through those partnerships we work with the counties, cities in the region, and private and public entities. And I'm here to hopefully urge you, as you're beginning this new council in this process, that you understand that the access to resources we have now is not equitable, and as you're designing this process, you consider not only sharing the end value of what you're creating here, but opening the processes to be more transparent, and doing that through data and metrics. So your decision making is data driven and not based on anecdotal evidence, and we're making sure that we're inclusive. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think it should be, I'll bring something forward for you guys. I think the direction that we should actually direct ourselves is, if you look at the collapse of Wall Street right now, I think it should be indicative that the very fact we have not had a top-down policy to shut down any Wall Street speculative banking as FDR did, there would be a collapse, and that collapse could happen this week. And the reason why I'm stating this is because I think people don't understand the fact that our country has been in a very situation where we find ourselves that because we did not do what we had to do in terms of promoting the separation of the banks with the Glass-Steagall Act, as FDR did, if it happens, you're going to get more people committing suicide in a fast rate than has ever occurred during that Great Depression. And now what I'm going to say has to be embedded within yourselves. The policy that we have to go towards in order to eradicate whatever you're forcing this country, or at least you're planning to do for the country, has to be from a top-down measure. If you do not go with the Glass-Steagall Act now, we will find ourselves quickly soon, and you will find yourself in a position where you cannot do anything about the fact that people are about to die. Now, this means what the gentleman said. You take what LaRouche has been stating for a long time, shut down Wall Street.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Amy Turk. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Downtown Women's Center and a social worker who's been working closely for the last 15 years in programs that work with unaccompanied women experiencing homelessness, meaning older women who are in families but do not qualify for family services. And I just wanted to appreciate from the Downtown Women's Center your work at looking at the intersection of health and homelessness, and we were very excited to see the agenda tonight because you will be hearing from speakers that are doing work that is really working right now, specifically from the Department of Health Services in their Housing for Health program. As new partners with that, we were so excited to see a system that is finally working with effective results in getting people into housing as fast as possible with tremendous cost effectiveness. And we are bringing to that table the importance of looking at the unique health disparities that women experiencing homelessness have as well. So we would be happy to be of help to you in your work, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, on a first note, there were speaker cards on items 1 and 2. You didn't call the speaker cards. You haven't called a single speaker card in violation of the Ralph M. Brown Act. So you need to confer with counsel why you're violating the Ralph M. Brown Act the way you're doing it, and please cease and desist from that type of activity. Because on November the 10th, at the Los Angeles Police Commission, I was arrested in the lobby because I tried to put some speaker cards in, and they went ahead and arrested me and another black gentleman named Michael Hunt. Then he was released, Michael Hunt, on his own recognizance. Oh, but not me. No. 13 and a half hours later, at 1 o'clock in the morning on Veterans Day, I was finally released. And I got a chance to spend some time in the Los Angeles Metropolitan Detention Center over there on North Los Angeles Street in Temple. You know there's no running water that's hot running water. They have no hot running water in any of the detention facilities. Did you know that they put fans on people so that you get a pneumonia? I've had a walking fucking pneumonia since that day. Did you know that? No, you didn't know that because nobody reports the news. And you're sitting here right now in this type of temperature while they're rolling in inmates right now to kill these people and give them pneumonia and contagious diseases because you can't take the time to do an inspection of the LA Metropolitan Detention Center with a department with a budget of nearly 33% of the city's budget, or over $1.4 billion a year. So let's all get up right now and go over to Temple and North Hill and stop these civil rights and human rights violations now.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Los Angeles Health Commission. My name is General Jeff. I am a proud Skid Row resident. I am also on the newly appointed to the Los Angeles County Health Agency Integration Advisory Board, where I am the chair of the subcommittee on homelessness. and I'm also a longtime Skid Row community activist. So I just want to introduce myself, and I look forward to seeing the wonderful things that have come out of this commission, because for years we've been saying in Skid Row, this is such deplorable and inhumane conditions that we need all hands on deck to find the true solutions in order to solve homelessness, not only in Skid Row, but across all of Los Angeles City Council. And so I want to take this time to personally invite you all to show what we're doing in Skid Row. We're in the process of creating the Skid Row Neighborhood Council. And so next Tuesday on December 22nd at 6 p.m., we're going to have a joint meeting of the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee and also the IAB Subcommittee on Homelessness at James Wood Community Center in Skid Row. That's December 22nd at 6 p.m. Look forward to hearing the wonderful presentations tonight, and I look forward to speaking with each and every one of you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Eduardo Martinez, and I promise not to use any foul language. I've been living with HIV for the last 29 years, so it's very important that the funds for the HIV community are there. I just learned from the HIV Commission that close to $8 million are going to be sent back to the state instead of being used here in the county of LA, especially in the city of LA. Most of our patients live in the city of LA, and they're going to be impacted directly if the funds are not available to take care of them. I can personally tell you that the most important thing living with HIV is able to take medications, be able to have a qualified doctor that can guide you to the HIV epidemic. And please, if you can take a minute and call the HIV Commission and see if they can explain to you why are they sending close to $8 million back to the state when that money can be used here in the city of LA. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else for public comment? Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming out. We're going to move on to our next agenda. Oh, one more person. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name is Mickey Jackson. I'm with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. Actually, I wanted to elaborate just a tad on the HIV Commission. Actually, what it is there's $8.9 million unspent, so it's almost $9. $2 million is to be sent back to the state, and when some commissioners tried to hold it another month, try to reprogram it, they were told by the county that would be a shame because some poor woman in Napa might not get services because they didn't get it to the state in time. The essential problem is $2.9 million of Minority AIDS Initiative, which is to be used for minorities, has not been spent. $2 million was not spent of that money the year before. Now we have, one of the problems is the providers are having trouble expending their grants, but part of the problem is they got cuts from the county agency and they got caps shot all through their contracts so that they can't spend the money. So of course it isn't spent. It's the first time I've been going to this commission since there's been a commission. It's the first time they've had unspent money like this. They're picking up POPWA's costs in many cases to try to spend the money. And I'm not quite sure how that works between the county and the state. I do know none of the board offices know about it. So there's a real problem there, the likes of which I have not seen in over 20 years. So I hope you can help us find out more of what actually has gone on. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here and see you all. John, an old friend. And I have high hopes for this commission. There's some great people on it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That will conclude public comment. We're going to move on to item number 4, which is a presentation by Dr. Mitchell Katz, Director of the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services, on the consolidation of health, mental health, and public health within the county, and on the Housing to Health program which is within the county that houses people who are homeless. And if you'd like, you can sit up here.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it very much. When I came to Los Angeles 5 years ago, I noticed that there was a fair amount of tension between the city and county. And I noted when I started talking about issues of housing and how we're going to increase access, there was a lot of negative finger pointing. And I'm really happy to say that 5 years ago, it feels like the world has changed. On both sides, I experience a tremendous openness to working together, to solving this issue. I know the county is committed. I certainly feel the commitment from the mayor and from his staff and from this commission. Just the fact that you would put this on your agenda as a specific thing speaks so much about how you feel about the issue, and I think that in and of itself is a wonderful thing. I advocated for the coming together of 3 county departments, the Department of Health Services, the Department of Mental Health, and the Department of Public Health, which runs our substance abuse services, largely because as a clinician, I found that so many of my public health patients were suffering from physical illness, from mental illness, and from addiction, and that it was a tremendous challenge to try to get them the services they need. And that challenge wasn't any unwillingness or any antagonism or any lack of good people trying to do the right thing. What it was is that each system developed its own set of rules. And it was extremely difficult for any client to successfully navigate that set of rules to get all of the different pieces. And I'm a big believer that if we are ever going to solve complex problems like homelessness, poverty, domestic violence, the kinds of issues that really affect our urban health, we have to have people rowing in the same direction. It's not sufficient to have good people doing good things. You actually need the good people doing good things to be doing them along a common goal with a common metric, the theory of collective action, that's how you make the biggest difference. And so I'm very excited about the agency, and we've already had some early successes, especially in the area of housing homeless people who need a very high level of services. In some cases, people actually able to leave the jail with really severe mental illness who never could have left before because we never had a program prior that would pair housing with mental health services. And you can't leave without both pieces. So I think that the proof is already happening that by being together, we can do more things. In the area of housing, I want to talk about why I think Housing for Health has been a success in LA. I think there were a few specific things about the program. One is that I think among housing programs, it is the most client-centered, which is to say we're prepared to house the person whatever their set of issues are. We don't have exclusion criteria. Even once we house the people, the only rule we really stick to is you can't interfere with other people who are living here, right? But we try to make sure that we're not right from the start saying, okay, well, we'll house you. No, we won't house you, especially because in the past, that we won't house you was usually because you were too ill. You were too mentally ill, you were too physically ill, or you were too addicted. But that's the very people who most need housing, right? Those are the people you don't want living under the freeway. Those are the people who die under the freeway, right? So the idea that you would have housing programs that would actually exclude people either because they were too sick, too mentally ill, or too addicted seemed backwards to us. And so we don't have any such exclusion criteria. We will house anyone who is homeless and has illness in any of the 3 areas, and I think we specialize in housing those people who have issues in all 3 areas, and we seek to house those who are most in need, not those who are easiest to house. Second, the program sets no income issues. We expect that all clients, like all of us, put a third of their money to their housing. But if a third is the third of their general assistance check, then it's a third of their general assistance check. We don't require that people have SSI. We don't require that they have any, specific funding thing. Third, we don't maintain any waiting list. What we do is we bring on housing, and the newest numbers are we're up to 1,150 units now of housing for people with medical, mental health, or substance use, which is, that's created new housing, not generally bricks and mortar, although in a few cases, like the Star Apartments, it is bricks and mortar. It's more commonly master leased units or renovated units or units in other people's low-income housing projects. We now have 1,150 people who live in those housing programs. What we do is we typically bring up a program, and then we figure out who are the people who need it the most, and we move them into that program. And we do that because it's our experience that you can spend a lot of money keeping lists of people. Those lists get very long, and you wind up spending all your money updating those lists, trying to find those people. And also, the seriousness of people's issues varies over time. So instead, what we do is, okay, we know we have 30 units opening up, so then the month before, we'll figure out, okay, who are the 30 people who most need to be housed, and we will get whatever is done. We also, as part of our spectrum, we have recoup housing, and we're about to open up more recoup housing at the MLK campus. And recoup, we feel, serves a special need. Recoup is not shelter. Recoup is really focused on the idea that if any of us in this room were ill and we're in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, after we got mostly better, we would be sent out. And hopefully our loving families would bring us food, they'd keep us warm, they'd make sure we were hydrated. But what if you're that same person but you don't have a family, you don't have anybody who's going to do that? So you're done with the hospital, but you still need somebody who's going to bring you food, right? I mean, even your own apartment wouldn't necessarily work well under that model if nobody is prepared to come to help you. So we found that the recoup care is a great source. And the last principle, which is one I'm also very proud of and very committed to, is once you start with us, you don't expire. We don't have any programs that run out. I think there is a tremendous waste of money and effort, and I've seen it in multiple counties, where someone is put through, say, a 90-day residential treatment program, and the 90-day comes to the end, and then they're done, and then they're homeless again. And not only does it hurt my heart to see people homeless, but I think what a waste of that 90 days. Because what's the chance that in the money you've spent, and often some of those programs might be and should be as much as $100 or $200 a day, because they're intensive. But if you spend $200 a day for 90 days, and then you discharge them to the street, chances are you've just wasted a lot of money, because the person's not going to be able to maintain their sobriety. They're going to go back to exactly the same place they came from, right? So I'm a big believer that whatever resources we have, once we commit to somebody, we see them through. We hope to graduate people, and I think that the system hasn't done enough thought about how do you graduate people, because that's the ultimate sustainability model. And there are some wonderful agencies. I just named Custodial, who I think really focuses on Custodial. I always mispronounce it. Custodial, who really focus on the idea that for social programs to be successful and sustainable, you need to graduate people. You need not just to house them, but then you need to get them a job and job experience, and then help them to find housing with a smaller subsidy so that you have a spot for someone else. And if you don't do that, then you fill up all your spots, and then you still have newly homeless people. So with that, I'm much more interested in what you have to say than what I have to say. I just look forward to working with you in the coming months and years. I'm an LA resident myself. I love Los Angeles, both the city and the county. I feel that we'll do great things together. Thank you.
Okay, great. So colleagues, we'll move to questions now, and I just have a few for Dr. Katz, and we can go around. And if anyone has any questions for him, please ask. I'm just wondering if you could explain to everyone the flexible subsidized housing pool, which is different from HACLA and HUD-based programs.
Very good. Thank you for that question. So one important component of our housing program is the flexible spending pool, which came from a grant from the Hilton Foundation, which was then matched in size by the LA County. And what is wonderful about it is it's a flexible pool that we can use to house someone for whatever it is they need. So there are some people, for example, who need just a shallow subsidy. They have an SSI check, and the SSI check almost gets them housed, but not quite. Then there are other people who are in a terrible strait, and they will not work in permanent housing, at least not in the short term, because they need some more services. They really need a board and care, but they're not eligible, there isn't a payer, so we'll use that for the board and care. And it's also great for us because many of the housing programs that come through federal money have restrictions. So people who may have had a previous conviction of a crime, people who are undocumented. And a principle of our health department is we only run one system. We don't have one door. We do not distinguish people who are documented from undocumented, people with conviction histories, people not conviction histories. We attempt to meet people, whether it's for their medical care or for housing, we meet them where they are. So because it's flexible, it doesn't fall under any of those other rules. So we often use it as the plug, so that if, let's say, we're bringing on a housing authority program, and we have 80, the building has 80 slots, we might have 60 people who can go on a voucher, and 20 other people who are ideal for the program, but they can't go on a voucher. So those we use the subsidy, and then we have the 80 people.
And with your statistic of 1,150 people housed, that's a county statistic. Do you know how many people who are homeless in the city that you've housed that's part of that 1,150?
No, but I'd be happy to find out.
Okay.
I mean, I would think that it would be a large percentage, just because I'm thinking about, what I do know is the neighborhoods that most of our housing have been in. So the largest number of units is in the downtown or in south central Los Angeles. And we always seek to try to house homeless people in the areas where they live. So for example, we have a great program in Antelope Valley, but it's for homeless people in Antelope Valley. We have a good program in Santa Monica, it's for homeless people in Santa Monica. But because most of the units are in the city, but I'll find out the answer.
Okay. Great, thank you. Are there any other questions for Dr. Katz?
I have a question.
And if you could please say your name just for the people listening online.
You mentioned Recoup Care. Is that an LA County program? Because I work with an organization that's titled Recuperative Care. It's a National Health Foundation in downtown Los Angeles. And they're doing a very similar thing. I'm a former hospital administrator, so the issue of being able to discharge somebody to somewhere where they're going to get continued services. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about Recoup.
Sure. So there is a county-funded program done by a nonprofit contractor in Los Angeles. And then the county itself is going to open up an additional, I believe, 60 beds at MLK site. They're going to open in February or March. And it is exactly as you say, right? It's really focused on people who've been recently hospitalized, who need a place to go. They're homeless, they need additional care, and we will ideally then move them from there to housing.
I just see an opportunity to partner with an organization that has a very successful recuperative care
That's
program
great.
here in the city. So maybe we can talk more about that.
Right, I'd like that. Thank you.
Any other questions? And if you could please say your name just for the people listening online.
John Hisrick. Actually, this is slightly off of housing. There's a document that we were given about the relationship between the County Department of Public Health, which was the predecessor before consolidated, and the city. Are there actual contractual relationships between the city and the county to carry out public health functions?
I am not the best person to answer that question. There is Joshua in the audience who is. Do you want to ask him to come up and answer
Joshua
that?
Dombrowski's here.
I mean, my reason for asking is that we're supposed to take a look at the relationship, and I just wondered if there was contracts with deliverables.
There is a contract with the City of LA to provide this service.
Please introduce yourself briefly.
Sorry,
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry.
Joshua.
Joshua Bobrowski with the Department of Public Health.
And that contract is to do what?
To provide public health services that are mandated by the state.
So the data collection and all that is part of it? I mean, for example, health education, communicable disease control, all those issues of public health, there's a contract from the city. Does the city give money to the county to do that?
No, I don't believe the city gives money to the county to do that.
So it's just a sort of relationship, I guess you could say.
Correct, as we have with most of the cities in the
But
county.
no specific compensation or deliverables that one could pin down.
I believe that's accurate. Again, I'm not also as
Well,
versed
it's just
in it and haven't-
because I've been hearing that, that there is some contractual relationship, and I just was unaware of it, because to differentiate what you do in the city from what you do in the adjacent unincorporated area would be sort of hard for me to tease out and say there's a contract to do this.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, and maybe this is a good issue for us to bring back, historically, the California has done most of its health business at a county level.
Through the county, right.
Right. But of course, especially when you're talking about cities have certain rights, right? And so then you have to distribute for any given issue who does what. What's a county function and what's a city function.
Right.
And my understanding is, and I think from what Joshua says, it's confirmed, there is an agreement that must be written somewhere on who does what. I don't think that any money would move, because that wouldn't make any sense, right? The county is generally the provider of health services, unless the city says, no, we wish to do that.
Right. Okay, well, at some point, I'd like to see some document, if there is one, just so we know what we're looking at. Thank you.
We can provide the
Great,
city
thank you.
contract.
Are there any other questions? Please state your name.
Dr. Howie Mandel, it's nice to see you. Thank you for being here. The question I have is kind of a broad question in regards to the Affordable Care Act and the impact on the decrease in disproportionate share hospital funds, which is going to really hit us nationwide in 2017, but with the county probably being not just the county system, but all the hospitals in the county being the largest collected funds from the DISH program. When we take that significant hit in 2017, 2018, what impact is that going to have on, say, these homeless programs that we're instituting and growing?
Thanks, Dr. Mandel. Well, I have a little bit of hope that it's already been delayed once, right? So my view in general is, if we take a step back, why is there an issue? There is an issue because in a place like Los Angeles, there are a large number of undocumented people, right? And they're not helped by the ACA, as great as the ACA is. They're excluded. Any place, and Los Angeles is like 0.0 on this, that has huge numbers of undocumented is either going to take care of them and incur a cost probably too large for a county to do by itself, or, unfortunately, as some counties have done, turn a blind eye and say, we're not going to do this. Part of why LA does it is both, in my view, a liberal progressive tradition, which is commendable, and also because we have public hospitals, right? So if you have public hospitals and you, in a sense, because of the federal laws under EMTALA, you can't turn people away anyway. So it turns out that it's not only compassionate, it's the economically sensible thing to do, because if you don't provide clinical services, then people just come at a later stage of illness when it's more expensive. So my view is that ultimately the federal government, one way or another, has to maintain or should want to maintain these systems, should not want to see them go. And that this is just a recent version of that. There are other versions of that, and that we will either succeed in getting it extended, or we will succeed in advocating for some other way to do the same thing. The other thing that your comment gives me a chance to say is that ultimately I do believe housing is less expensive, right? So that we should always be able to do housing. And we did negotiate under the new 1115 waiver, the whole person care projects, that they would provide incentives to providers like us who provide the kinds of services that keep people off the streets. And I hope that we're going to use that money not only for things like housing, but we're also going to use it for a sobering center. We're already in negotiations for a piece of property in the Skid Row area to lease to create a sobering center so that inebriates are not brought to hospitals or to jail, but are brought to a safe place where they can receive food, bedding, have a physician, nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant watch over them, and in the morning get referred for substance treatment. So your question is right on the money, if you will. I'm an optimistic guy. I figure we'll all work together and make sure the system stays whole. If that hole does get created, that would be a problem.
Do you see any way that this commission or the City of Los Angeles can help you in regards to getting that extended and or alternatively a new development that replaces the dish?
Well, I think ultimately what we're on the cusp of, and that your commission can help, is the recognition that the non-medical services are medical services. And if we could actually get things like housing reimbursed on the Medicaid side, even though we would still have the hole because of the undocumented, we'd have more dollars, and we'd actually be able to then deal with that other hole. And I think it is a cusp. I mean, people now, it's the first time that I felt like Medicaid is starting to understand that you are, as physicians, if we can order an MRI that won't change someone's life, why can't we, for less money, house them for a month? Right. I mean,
exactly.
It's just the more pertinent service.
Great, thank you.
I'm happy to see your president has arrived.
It was a hard road getting here, to be candid about it. My gentleman who helped me get here and I both got lost. And then we finally saw City Hall. I said, there it is, and we got here. So I apologize to everybody in the room, my fellow commissioners, our speakers, who are incredible people in healthcare issues. Keep doing it, yeah. You know, this is a great guy, just so you know. And he's somebody I most recently met in the last couple of months as I was getting ready for these different meetings. But he's first class. And don't shy away from asking him any question or trying to get a sensibilities of where he's coming from. I just got to ask you one big question. When we all work together, the city and the county, what do you expect will happen to make this all work together so we make a difference?
Scale, Mr. President. I mean, I think the difference for all of these social problems is that people have individually solved them. There are great housing programs, there are great diversion programs that move people out of jail, there are great mental health programs. The issue is scale. Can you do it in LA? Can we do, we've done, 1150. We estimate that there are 10,000 people with serious illness on the street in Los Angeles who need housing, right? So can we work together and go beyond 1150 to 10,000? And I think we can.
Me too. And how long will it take us to do that at this point in time?
I think we're on a 3 to 5 year plan to get over 10,000 units.
That would be terrific. I look forward to that. I hope I'm still alive and around and kicking to watch that happen. But it certainly makes sense to me. I was very upset, besides getting lost coming to City Hall, I used to work, but there were people all over the streets in tents and putting together makeshift shelters for the night. And I'm saying, why are they all on the street? Can't we do better? We know that New York has put $1 billion in play already, $1 billion to do things. And we're not doing that kind of thing, but we got to get in that direction and do what they've been doing. And you provide energy, light, and togetherness. So I hope with your leadership in the position you have in the county that can impact and reflect with the city, that we all together can end up spending a lot more money than $100 million, a lot more money than $200 million, or $300 or $400. Maybe we get to $500 million in a short period of time. But we've got to take care of all the people on the street. That's what it's all about. And the more we do, the better off we all are. And thank you for your leadership and everything you've been doing for all of us.
Thank you, Mr.
Since
President.
you came down.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Hi, Commissioner Dr. Erica Hawkins. Thank you so much for your report. Really enjoyed it. I want to focus on the issue of veterans and veteran homelessness. This is a major issue as far as with the President Obama's directive, as well as Mayor Garcetti's joining on to eradicate veteran homelessness. As you understand, as far as homelessness, it's not just a matter of just giving someone a voucher. It's rapid response services. What is being done? Are you working with the VA, and what other types of services are you receiving so that we can address this vulnerable population? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that question. Actually, based on the mayor's meeting on the issue of vets, we have now a group looking at master leasing units. Because as you know, before you even get to the wraparound services, it's unbelievable to me how we create bureaucracy to defeat the very things we're trying to do. But at this moment, you have over 1,000 veterans in LA who are holding a voucher worth 110% of the average rent, and they're homeless. The reason they're homeless is because, and this is for other people, I know you already understand this issue. When you have a voucher, you have to find a landlord who will accept the voucher. And when the landlord accepts you, the landlord is not going to get paid for approximately 60 days while that unit is going to be inspected. So you're in a tight housing market right now. There's a fair amount of gentrification going on in Los Angeles. So the landlord can rent to whomever they want. Are they going to rent to you, who they have to wait 60 days to get paid, or are they going to rent to somebody who brings the 2 months right there? In addition, apparently, the Veterans Association pays slowly, so that you're also going to get paid for future months late. So what I've asked my staff to work on with the housing authorities is that's a solvable problem. The city or the county or one of the housing authorities could enter into a master lease, rent 1,000 units for people who hold the voucher. The cost is pretty minuscule because they have 110% on the rent. So you're only covering the 2 months. And if you created large numbers of units, you could probably get the feds to inspect them more rapidly. So you could shorten it. And you wouldn't need so many people trying to find a single veteran, a single unit, which is what's going on now. Again, imagine the inefficiency with as the president talks about all these people on the street, and we're at the level of one veteran working with one housing advocate, trying to find one unit with all the landlords, when you could do that. So I also feel if we did it that way, we would get enough density to make it more efficient to do the wraparounds. It's, while not impossible, and we've been experimenting with scattered site, it can't be too scattered or it gets just too inefficient. So we don't need the whole building, but it helps if we have 8 people in this building, 6 people in this building, some economies of scale, which would also help with the master leasing. So, and then, you know, again, to fill out for people not as familiar as you, then there's another issue about veterans with dishonorable discharges, right? So that's the group of people who say, you know, I served in Vietnam, and people are like, well, the Veterans Administration should be housing you, but they're not going to get anything if they were dishonorable discharge. But nonetheless, often those dishonorable discharges were due to post-traumatic stress syndrome from the things they witnessed, and probably a propensity for mental illness that then was exacerbated by what they saw, right? And we need to take care of those people. So I see us in the flexible dollars, that's another matching opportunity, right? Where you create a facility, a master lease for vets, and then some of the people turn out to be veterans who don't qualify for a subsidy. That's what we're going to try to do. They're in active negotiations about who would carry the master lease.
I was also the vice chair for HACLA and also former appointee for Donovan and Castro at HUD. This is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. Anything I can do to assist on the HACLA side as well as on the commission, anything I can do to help bridge those gaps, because it's such a much needed issue that needs to be addressed, as you're aware of, and having bureaucracy is not an excuse to not home our heroes. So like I said, anything we can do to assist.
I will take you up on it. The thing is,
Thank
as
you.
soon as we decide which of those entities will carry the master lease, I'll ask you to come and testify as an expert about why a master lease. Again, it will be very low cost because they all have the subsidy.
Have you presented to HACLA yet on this issue?
HACLA has been involved. They're part of the discussions.
Okay.
I think everybody sees the wisdom. We just have to get a designated hitter. And it doesn't, from my point of view, it doesn't matter who it is, but either the city, the county, or one of the 2 housing authorities has to be the entity that enters into the lease. And from my point of view, it should be whoever can do it the easiest. Right. Who's ever, granting authority would be fastest to enter into that agreement. Think about just the economic potential lost, right? I mean, besides the humanitarian issues, those dollars are going away from LA, right? Every month, those 1,000 people, their rent is not going to economic growth in Los Angeles. It's completely wasted. So, very sad. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Katz. Helen Areola. And I, too, wish to thank you very much for being here today and providing some information that will help this commission achieve some of our goals. But my question is, most likely, or generally speaking, when we think about homeless, we think about individual people. But my question is, what about families? Are they being looked at on a separate track, or what can you shed on that?
So in terms of the Housing for Health, we house families. I think that obviously, given the vulnerability of children, that families with small children have to come to the top of any line when it comes to housing. And I think it's heartbreaking that in a society like ours, we would ever allow a kid to be living on the street with their parents. So we include it. We don't have, but there are programs that are specific for families. I'm not expert in them, and we could certainly have someone come to speak to those. But I agree with the mission in your comment. It's critical.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp, just very briefly, wanted to recognize and appreciate your participation this evening and the level of detail you've brought to the discussion around the intersection of the various elements and strategies of the healthcare system with the housing challenge facing the homeless population. It'd be great if you or designees could come to future meetings to discuss similarly innovative strategies in some of the other programmatic areas in mental health, public health, and some of the other population strategies that are of relevance to city residents at a future date and time.
That'd be great. Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like that.
Dr. Katz, we just want to thank you so much for coming. I've actually been to the Housing for Health headquarters at the Star Apartments, and while I was there, I saw a lot of ambulances come by and a lot of activity on Skid Row, which is where you're located. And I think the one thing that we didn't talk about were the cost savings associated with permanent supportive housing as opposed to someone being homeless. And I'm wondering if you could just speak to that.
Sure. Well, the biggest data collection effort on this in Los Angeles was the Project 50, which showed large savings in hospitalization, EMS calls, incarceration associated with housing people. So I don't think there's any question that when you house people, you save dollars. I think the challenge, and here too I see how the Commission can be helpful, the challenge is to get people out of their silos to see how to use those dollars. And when I came here 5 years ago, and I started talking to them at LAC, USC, about one of my hospitals, about what they needed, they told me about all these people who were in the hospital only because they were homeless. And I was like, well, why don't you house them? And said, we don't have any money. And I'm like staring at them thinking, but you're spending $2,000 a day on them in the hospital. How can you say you don't have any money to house them? And the answer is people get stuck in their little box, right? And they're right, it isn't always easy to move the money. But as you had said, Commissioner, right, bureaucracy is not an excuse, right? It may be a true challenge, and it may take a group like you to help me move it. But the point is, if there's money, there's money. If you can spend the money to keep them in the hospital, you can spend less money to house them. But you have to think of it that way. You have to be willing to say, okay, we're going to do this. And I'd say in terms of leadership, and again, your commission can be helpful, because true leadership to me, it often involves a leap. And the particular leap in this case is people are very willing to move money, they say, after you prove that it works, right? So even when I first started talking about housing in Los Angeles, the hospital said, well, don't take the money from the hospital budget yet. Why don't you first create the housing, and then if it results in decreased patients here, then we'll move the money. It's like, well, but how do I create the housing? Right? You have to, at some point, you have to be willing to take the leap, or it never happens, and you're just stuck. I think the same is true around jail expenses, which is one of the highest. You want to talk about money in the system, it's $130,000 a year custodial cost for the LA County Jail. In the LA County Jail, there are approximately 25% of inmates whose mental health is severe enough that they are on antipsychotic medications, right? So we're not talking about, you know, an adjustment disorder or a mild depression, right? That figure is just the custodial care, it's not the cost of taking care of them. If they were in some sort of alternative custody situation, which can even include, you know, ankle bracelets and people being in other kinds of secure environments, but not in jail, we would receive federal dollars for caring for their mental illness. So we're spending tremendous expense, and we're not getting paid, and everybody agrees that the jail is no place to recover from your mental illness. We have a unique moment. We have a new sheriff who is very progressive on these issues. We have a new DA, Lacey, who's very progressive on these issues. We have a new board. Your mayor has spoken a number of times, and in fact, he's created the first position in city government on diversion. So I feel like, and it's very connected to the housing and the homeless, because when people are released, 1,100 people leave county jail every day, and a large number of them leave with a token at 10 p.m. at night, right? And many of those people go to Skid Row, right? So, you know, recognizing how these problems are interconnected and where the money is, so we can move the money to the things that we want to provide. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Follow-up question. Commissioner Hawkins again. We addressed the issue of homelessness, focusing on children on Skid Row when I formerly used to work for Supervisor Gloria Molina. And what we used to do is we used to work with county departments and would go out to Skid Row and do casework management. Is that something that you continue to do, or is that something that needs to be implemented?
I believe they're still doing that, but I'll check for you. I'll find out.
Okay, thank you so much. And I just want to say, I think Housing for Health is one of the most effective housing programs right now. And I mean, obviously our organization utilizes it because it's such a fantastic program and has really done a lot to break down barriers. So thank you so much for instituting that here in LA.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move on to public comment. Do you want to do the public comment?
Let's do public comment right now, before you leave. Why don't you turn the chair around, sit over here, and talk to the public, and each one's going to speak their heart and their mind. Okay? All right. The first person on the list is Mr. H, or Mrs. H, or whatever.
Missy's fine with me.
Good.
But I can bitch all night. The whole problem regarding what Dr. Katz is talking about is so true. I can't stop but to wonder why this issue continues to be just a little element of the closed box syndrome. Stuck on stupid. Local government is so stuck on stupid that they can't take the advice of a professional. Yet, the criticism under 54954(3) parentheses says, criticize legislation so that they can perform their fucking responsibilities to care for the people on our streets. Now, to the public, some of you find my intensifiers offensive, but you're welcome to leave. They're simply intensifiers to gain the perspective point of this whole issue here, as Dr. Katz brought out in his last 40 minutes of explanation. And some of you made very excellent points. I see where your motive and your apathetic feelings is towards the public. But now's the time in 2016 to kick the can out the window and get this shit rolling. Very frank. Tired of seeing encampments on the sidewalks. I'm tired of seeing encampments being disbarred, removed, all their possessions simply because a human being is homeless. Because our mayor is so busy standing in the lobby talking to some African developer regarding some situation that I have on record on my phone, which I will not disclose with you. But it just shows you, where is your condition of engagement for this problem, the struggle of humanity, the crisis, the war on homelessness? Take care of it today. These grants are purposeful only if you implement them and sacrifice them at no cost to any constituent.
Thank you. W. Spindler.
That's right.
How are you?
Well, not too good. I was illegally arrested last month. Now, you know, this thing about language, I was at the county board meeting last week on Tuesday, and Sheila Kuehl apparently has changed the standard of discussion.
I lived for 1 year in Saudi Arabia, and I asked any Muslim in America or the world, you are taught to hate Jews and to destroy Jews and to destroy Israel. You scumbag, you Sheila Kuehl, you anti-Semitic
Listen,
scumbag.
you asshole! I am a Jew. My mother was a Jew.
I don't get
And
it.
you can
You're
say
a
that
self-made
again.
Jew.
I
have the floor.
Okay.
I have the floor.
I want order in here, and I would fire you.
See, there you go. There's your public comment, and thank God I videotaped this, They were about to take this septuagenarian gentleman and wrap him around with 5 sheriff's deputies because of his words. The public speaking in this city, the First Amendment, has been destroyed. It's been suspended. In the Los Angeles Police Commission on November the 10th, I was arrested and held for 13 and a half hours and charged with failure to dispersal and attempted riot. On the 5th of this month of December, I had to, after posting a $5,000 bond, I had to be arraigned over in the criminal courts building. No charges were filed against me or Mr. Michael Hunt, who some of you might be familiar with. Steve Soboroff then, the following week, last week in the lobby, called me, quote, the worst piece of shit he's ever met in front of 17 witnesses. So this is your public officials, and this type of garbage is going to escalate, and this is why homeless people, this is why all of us are so offended by the way we're being treated.
Brian Barajas.
All right, look, I think I'm going to say something that might help you with this psychological problem. I think one of our intention in our organization with LaRouche PAC is if you ever consider the fact that music as such, classical music, actually reorganizes the human mind. If you ever wondered why, psychologists cannot perform the duties that supposedly their duties were supposed to be applied for, it's because they themselves fail to organize the human soul. Music is the best way to do that. In our organization, we adopt music. Why? And at a specific tuning. And this goes into something more which might sound complex, but it's not. The resonance of a musical instrument tuned at A432, that is to say 432 cycles per second, organizes the individual to actually comprehend what's called the human soul. We adopt that because we understand that the reason why certain situations which make the human person pretty much not a human being anymore is because they lack the fact that they were thrown in a situation where they had to be either killed or they have to kill. In order to do that and bring them back, classical culture, classical music.
That closes public comment. Do you want to respond to any of this?
I hope to work with people, continue to do good housing programs. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay, item number 5 is a presentation by Dr. Sion Roy, LA County Harbor UCLA Medical Center, on the health care costs associated with homelessness within the county hospital environment. Hi.
Thank you. My name is Shai Roy. I'm a cardiologist at Harbor UCLA. Congratulations on your appointments to this great new commission, and thank you for your service going forward. So, as we've talked a lot about housing, we need resources of all kinds in our county system. The majority of our county patients are LA City residents. In our county public health system, while we're certainly very good and at the community standard for emergency and inpatient care, and in some areas of emergency and inpatient care, we're superior to the community standard. We do lack proper resources for both outpatient care and discharge resources. We have inadequate but improving follow-up for primary care and certain medical tests, but I want to focus on a key problem in the county and hence the city, and that is finding a safe place for discharge for our homeless sick. We've talked a lot about homelessness, and the homeless sick population is the most vulnerable among that most vulnerable population. So these are patients who are homeless, cannot take care of themselves, don't have family or friends for help, cannot survive in a shelter because of health or mental health reasons. This continues to be an under-recognized at-risk population despite county efforts such as the Housing for Health program. The homeless sick are the most vulnerable population in an LA County homeless population that accounts for about 20% of the nation's homeless population. A problem admirably recognized by the City Council when it declared the homeless state of emergency a couple of months ago. I'm the medical director for the Gold Observation Unit at Harbor UCLA, and one of the things we do in my unit is we take care of patients who are referred from our emergency department, patients who report to the emergency department, who don't have an inpatient medical need, but who we are not able to safely discharge from the hospital. Many of these patients need a board and care. Some of them need a shelter, subacute nursing home, long-term care. And this is a challenging problem for not just Harbor UCLA, but public hospitals across the country, as our system is generally under-resourced in providing housing options for our mostly uninsured and underinsured county patient population. So when patients come from the emergency department and they're referred to my unit, which is actually a part of the emergency department, the Gold Unit, basically we have a social worker that's dedicated to providing safe discharge options to these patients. So, first, if we can safely discharge these patients to a homeless shelter, that is the most timely thing we can do, and we can do that rather quickly within 24 hours. However, once patients are at a shelter, for this particular patient population, we find that they often lose touch with medical care, as these patients don't have convenient access to appointments, medical prescription refills, and this leads to a cycle where patients get sick, they report to the hospital, and are given medications to improve their condition. We discharge them to homeless shelters, etc., with inadequate access to follow-up for multifactorial reasons, including transportation, and then they undergo a gradually worsening of their condition, leading to another hospitalization. I've been the medical director for the Gold Unit for a little more than a year now, and we see the same patients that cycle through, and we have the same cycle for tens of patients in the Harbor area. So we do the best we can, and we try to safely discharge patients with proper primary care follow-up, specialty care follow-up, medication refills as much as we can, and so we deal with those patients in that way from our hospital. But some patients can't be discharged to a shelter because they can't take care of themselves, or they rely on medications like insulin, need refrigeration, etc. So these patients need a long-term care facility or a subacute nursing facility. So when privately insured patients need these types of facilities, the facilities get reimbursed at a higher rate than Medi-Cal or Medicare. We don't typically see these patients in our hospital, but if we do see a private patient, they need these sort of care facilities, they're fairly easily placed in these facilities. No questions asked. The facilities take them. But most of our patients have Medi-Cal or would qualify for Medi-Cal if they apply, and we help facilitate those patients who come through, don't currently have Medi-Cal, but would qualify if they apply. So Medi-Cal, as you guys all know, is divided into non-managed care and managed care. And so, for example, just to look at pricing, if we discharge a Medi-Cal patient to a SNF, a subacute nursing facility, non-managed care Medi-Cal pays about $160 a day to the subacute nursing facility. Managed care Medi-Cal pays a little bit more, but this is still much lower than what private insurers pay. And so these facilities really are trying to compete for the privately insured patients, not the Medi-Cal patients. As you can imagine, this is a problem with services across the county. Medicare actually only pays for about 100 days. It pays for 100 days, and it has a limit in terms of how much they will pay for SNF or long-term care. And these patients then have to subsequently apply for Medi-Cal. And so Medi-Cal covers these patients, the elderly, who are not privately insured and can't otherwise afford this care. Board and cares, which is basically some minimal level of help, they don't get reimbursed at all, either by Medi-Cal, Medicare, and not typically by privately insured companies either. And so patients pay for this through SSI payments, et cetera. Undocumented so looking at these Medi-Cal patients, if patients come through into our facility, they need a SNF or a long-term care for safe discharge. Often they are housed in our facility taking up inpatient beds while they apply for Medi-Cal, and this can take varying amounts of time. And so easier access to Medi-Cal and a quicker application process would save hospitals more money, our county hospitals more money. So that's something that I want you to take away from that, from my presentation. Undocumented patients, which constitute about a third of our county patients, they can get restricted Medi-Cal, and restricted Medi-Cal really just covers inpatient and emergency services, doesn't account for housing. But if they need a subacute nursing facility or some sort of housing long-term care, they can apply for what's called PRU-Call. And this is a long process, and undocumented patients wait at Harbor for months, weeks to months. We've had patients who've waited more than a year for PRU-Call to come through and because of various barriers to discharge. So at Harbor and at LA County USC, there are patients who are no inpatient medical need who are taking up inpatient beds in these crowded county facilities. A, it's not cost effective. B, it's not good for patients. It's not good for anybody to be in the hospital if they don't have to be in the hospital. And C, it's just not cost effective. So PRU-Call and Medi-Cal patients, these processes take a long period of time, and then once they get them, facilities don't want to take these patients because the reimbursement rates aren't high, so it ends up with lengthy hospitalizations for unnecessary reasons. So what do we need in terms of safely discharging from the homeless sick, for the homeless sick population at county facilities, and what can you help us with from a city perspective? And so, I've talked about the Medi-Cal process and expediting that. And we need just generally more resources, more access to SNFs, more long-term care facilities. And Housing for Health has helped to some degree, opening up what Dr. Katz was talking about, the recuperative care beds. But we are still vastly under-resourced, as we know. This is bad not only for patient care, but also not cost-effective for our systems. And as patients stay in the hospital for long periods of time, costing the county more money, if we're able to safely and appropriately discharge them in a timely fashion, we can help these patients and save money. Finally, I want to talk about warm handoffs. So because hospitals in the past, and currently we investigate this, have quote-unquote dumped patients by transporting them to shelters inappropriately just to get patients out of the hospital, hospitals are no longer allowed to, for example, put a patient in a taxi cab and tell them to go to a shelter, because there's a fine line between making it convenient for patients to go to shelter and this quote-unquote dumping. But what happens is when I discharge patients from our Gold unit, we send these patients who are hospitalized, who have multiple medical problems, and all we give them are bus tokens to go to a shelter. And we give them an address, and we make sure that the shelter has a bed for them because we discharge them early in the morning. But I don't really know what happens to them. We get them out the door with the proper resources, but I don't know what happens to them once they get out there. I don't know if they safely make it to make it to that homeless shelter. And I know often they don't because they come back either the next day or a month from now, or the social worker gets a call from the homeless shelter, this patient that you told me about never showed up. That happens very often. And it's not unexpected. You know, you're expecting these patients who, you know, to take a bus for an hour or two with multiple changes who are not healthy patients, which is why they're in the hospital in the first place. And so we need to more adequately get these vulnerable patients to homeless shelters. And whether that's the city helping to set up some sort of transportation system for safe discharge, some sort of exclusive busing system from county facilities to shelters, there has to be something done because this is going on and it's not recognized. And once patients get to a shelter, we have to get them back and forth to appointments and to get prescription refills. And so, you know, if we discharge them and they can't get to their primary care appointment because the bus takes 2 or 3 hours, and once they get to Harbor, they have to wait all afternoon to see a primary care person, that happens and patients don't come. And that's that cycle I'm talking about in terms of patients getting sicker and they come back through the hospital, through the emergency room, which is the worst way for patients to come through. So an investment in safe transportation for these patients is not only good for their population, but cost effective, as it should prevent more hospitalizations and get them to adequate outpatient care. So housing is important. And we've talked a lot about housing. That's exclusively what we talked about today. And we're just recognizing this in our medical evidence as well. There's a 2009 article in the Journal of the American Medical Association showing that a housing first strategy where chronically homeless alcoholic patients, as opposed to standard of care where they have to clean up in terms of rehab before getting housing, showed a significant cost savings in Seattle as little as 6-month follow-up. Additionally, more recently this year, 4 Canadian cities showed increased housing stability out to 4 years in a housing first strategy for mentally ill homeless patients. So while in LA we've invested in this, we're doing the right thing. This works, and more evidence is showing that we're doing the right thing. So housing and transportation are major issues in LA, just generally, and every single person, every single part of our population. But as the new Health Commission, I hope that you focus on these issues, including transportation, when we look at the homeless, sick, vulnerable population. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's not easy for you to do that, and it's not easy for us who are commissioners to hear it, but that is the reality. And that, coupled with Dr. Katz over there, we're in a tremendous situation where we need support. Not only do the bureaucrat types or government types at the moment, but the public more than anything. They're not getting the direction, the support, and the backup to make things happen. So I appreciate what you just shared with us as a great opening statement. Colleagues, does anybody want to say a few things? How do we want to do this, or do we want to open it to the public already? You want to speak? Go ahead.
First of all, Dr. Roy, thank you so much for coming. I'm wondering, though, if you could explain what the cost is per person, just on average, to stay in the hospital every day that they're waiting either for Medi-Cal to come through or for some kind of discharge policy.
So it varies, and obviously hospital billing data is not real cost, but we're talking about in the thousands of dollars per day for a ward bed at a county facility. And so it depends on how sick the patient is, how many, are they, what kind of medical care they need. But we're talking in the order of thousands of dollars per day, not, it's not just $10 a day.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Carolyn Andrews Taylor. About how many people do you see on average a day or a week coming through the emergency room who are homeless or that you need to find additional care for?
So some of through our unit, which are the more difficult discharges, you know, in the emergency department itself, they can get a social work consultant. If there is a fairly straightforward discharge with resources, they take care of that themselves without coming to my unit. But we see 30, 40 patients a month coming through our unit, and they have, and they're, in terms of our hospital policy, they're able to stay up to 3 business days in our unit before either, hopefully, the majority of them get safely discharged or as safely as possible possibly discharged, and otherwise they go upstairs into our hospital, up into our inpatient setting, and that has to do with patient flow coming through.
Thank you.
Please, go ahead.
Hi, Commissioner Hawkins. I had a couple questions for you. One, it just seems like there's definitely the issue of, first of all, the county is always inundated. The county health system is inundated. There's so much need and not enough individuals to help facilitate. So the issue of once they're discharged, is there a resource center where you can actually work with partners like FQHCs and any other partners that can come out and actually help enroll them as well, since provide other options to help alleviate the county system is one. And two, if it comes down to an issue of transportation and you send someone to a homeless shelter as you discussed, and then that shelter is taking about a month to call the social worker to let them know they didn't show up, there's a huge disconnect there. Is it just an issue of resources, or what's the process from the minute, are they given a dedicated social worker? Is it just they're just too overworked, too many cases? Why are they not being followed more closely?
Well, you know, and that's based on personal relationships. That's not a county to county. There's no true legal necessary communication between the shelter and the hospital. Once we discharge patients, I know our social worker who is dedicated to our unit has personal relationships, and he may hear about things, but that's not necessarily, it's just based on a personal relationship because somebody called him. And so it's not part of our system, it's not part of our bureaucratic system where somebody says, hey, you know, John Smith or John Doe didn't show up today, so I got to call Harbor and let's find out what happened. That's not part of the system currently. In terms of the first part of your question, the patients are referred to different services. So, you know, if they're a veteran, we refer them to Veterans Health Services. If they have mental health issues, we refer them to the appropriate places, housing issues. We help them with all of those things. The biggest issue, I think, in looking at it globally, is once we discharge them, and then so these patients have a housing problem, but they also have a mental health problem. They may have they have to go to different places for these resources. So these patients who don't have easy transportation have to go to one place for their mental health resources, and then they have to wait there all day because the lines at these places are so long. Then the next day or however long after, they have to go to another place for their housing resources. And so, you know, at a global level, I think what would be great is sort of what we've talked about, you know, more communication between the different departments, and what would be great is having a all-in-one sort of resource in our different county campuses to have, you know, you can do all of these social work things that you need to do in one trip in one day, go to the different offices, you know, first floor is whatever department, second floor is whatever department, and you can make one trip and you can do it all. And I think that's something that we really should be looking forward to as we, you know, do campus planning for the different county facilities.
That's great. It's like a one-stop shop, which would be great. So just walk me through the process. You have a homeless individual. They're told they're given a voucher to go to be taken to transportation to get taken to a homeless shelter. Are they assigned a caseworker? Are they assigned somebody who's going to explain the process? And I understand there's other outlying issues, but at least someone to explain. Monday you go here, here's your voucher. Tuesday you go here, this is what. Is there anybody explaining that entire process, or is there anybody dedicated, or are they just basically on their own?
So, you know, so when they come into they have a dedicated social worker who will come and who will talk to them as much as possible. And we have a team of great social workers who are also under-resourced themselves. once they get out, they can be hooked in with a case manager. And so it depends on the quality of our discharge. It depends on how well we are able to discharge these patients. And you know, there's a discharge checklist that we attempt to go through. And one thing I can say is we may be able to tell the patient that they have a caseworker, but we don't usually have a caseworker appointment for them when we send them out. There's nothing like that. We don't have the resources for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Comment, question from the commission? Well, we don't leave. We're ready for you to interact with the community that's in the room here now that is obviously concerned about a lot of things. Let's go with General Jeff.
Thank you, President Bill. Always a pleasure to see you. You look
Same
wonderful.
here.
Thank you. I know this is an item that specifically speaks to healthcare costs associated within the county hospitals, but you know, me being a community activist on the streets of Skid Row, I think that there are a lot of missed opportunities outside of county hospitals that can help cut down on the costs that this wonderful doctor was speaking to. You know, for instance, it starts when he talks about housing first. You know, I can't help but think about the Mental Health Services Act, which has raised over $1 billion now. It seems like some of that money could be used on housing. I don't know, that's a no-brainer for the mentally ill. I mean, that's a no-brainer. And also, too, when we want to talk about, you know, hospitals, we have to talk about health. You know, I can't help but think about in Skid Row, the environment. The environment is inhumane in Skid Row and across the city. So when we're talking about germs, disease, bacteria, and when you think of compare Skid Row to a hospital, you know, they're sanitizing, they're always cleaning. You know, you always feel like, okay, this is a place where my body can heal. On the streets of Skid Row is the complete opposite. But they're both places where the people are supposed to rehabilitate. How can you truly rehabilitate when the environment, spiritually, your body won't allow you to heal? So, you know, what we're talking about the environmental health. You know, we need a hand sanitizer to cut down on germs and diseases. We're talking about the things that cause people to get sick. If we mitigate those issues, then it also helps to cut down on the healthcare costs inside the hospitals. You know, there are not enough restrooms in Skid Row. There's 5 APTs, automatic public toilets that cleans themselves. There's nowhere in Skid Row for a homeless person to wash their hands. So if they're relieving themselves, whether it's number 1s or number 2s, you know, understand my French, that where do they wash their hands afterwards? Then if they're eating, if they're interacting with others, it's a mess.
Appreciate
Environment.
what you said. Thank you. We have our H again.
Dr. Roy, you brought out the word inadequate multiple times, but the inadequateness of your comments talk about a protection against the impairments that adversely impact the social community of what you see today in our hospitals. I work for the county. I know right from wrong working in a county facility. 6 fucking years, 6 hours, and 6 minutes of my time working for the county USC hospital. I know the system in and out. Been there, done that. But to correlate what I'm talking about is a non-governmental discrimination under the color of the state law, which I'll point out to you in a very simple term, that this is a bold human genocide if allowed to occur or result in the death and the welfare of every human being who is affected on our streets, meaning passing along a germ, a disease. Now, the gentleman who spoke before me brought it out very clear. If you went to the basics of providing water, clean sanitation, you would eliminate maybe 25% of the problem. But that's not my field of expertise, and I won't elaborate on the inadequateness of our city and county hospitalizations for homelessness. It's disgraceful. People sleeping in front of county facilities on the streets at our hospitals. So, not to go any deeper into all of this, all I can say is that, again, if we would simply stick to the truth, which falls on our country, then let us follow the support of the LaRouche and that of the Glass-Steagall to destroy those in the failing banks who deliberately cause many of the actions that are happening on our streets regarding homelessness.
Thank you. Brian Barajas.
That's a good introduction. Thank you, Hermit. Now, one of the diseases I think that happens during when you consider the fact that when you say to yourselves, why is it that we are not funding as should be adequate, and people have to understand budget cutting is not the solution, which actually results in what's called the euthanasia program. It's a problem. You cannot kill your patients. You cannot encourage your patients to consider suicide, all because of a budget issue. That is the road of Nazism. That's using or whatever you want to call it, the pathetic program that now Britain is taking up now under their healthcare system. We are Americans, and I'm warning people right now that the struggle is to take a top-down approach. You're struggling, you're limited, you're constrained by the fact that you do not have the federal government's backing. That is the cause of your problem. It is the cause. Why? Because the money that should have been implemented for federal initiatives, which could have been used to supply your system, to enhance it, to actually cause the system that you yourselves know is lacking because of what's called a government to back this situation that you know is going into hell, well, in a way, but you also have to fight for the solution. And that's why, as we say, you're now in a situation, either you go for this total elimination of Wall Street, because that's where the money's going, or you kill your population.
Now we have William or W, sorry, Spindler.
Oh, okay. Yes, now I was a guest in the city's joint county facility where they detain people. In the Metropolitan Detention Facility that the city built brand new, they don't have any hot running water, they don't have any soap, they don't have any hand sanitizers. They have these phones that everybody uses, and they're just a little tiny cord where you have to bend your neck like this to talk to your lawyer, if you can get one. Inhuman, lack of human rights. That's what you guys don't do on these commissions, the little things. Right down the street, you can take a small drive right over to the Metropolitan Detention Facility right now, and you'll see what they do to the homeless. They jail them on these little infractions and misdemeanors. They go to Skid Row. They drove me down to Skid Row first, and they booked me down at the Metropolitan Division. And they had a transgender person there, and they ripped his wig off. And then they started yelling, "Inward, inward, inward, inward," and the police in there were laughing and making it go further and further and further. I was in there 13 and a half hours I witnessed as they dragged me to 3 places. They jail the homeless, and they make them, force them into a 5150. So they put them on a psychological hold. They don't try to prevent the 5150. They engender and create the 5150, increasing these health care costs for the homeless. That's part of the problem, is they know they have criminalized homelessness. When the Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has ruled that a person has a right to sleep on the streets.
We're going to go to you're finished with you, but thank you. You'll definitely be back, because obviously these issues right now need more support and more backup so that we get everybody out of homelessness and work as a group. And it's the city and the county, it's the state and the federal government, and it's the obvious people we're working with which need help so that they can live a decent life. So
Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to testifying again if necessary.
yeah, well, we look forward to your solutions with us too. Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, now we have a bunch of more questions, and we have various ways of dealing with it. First way is I want to bring up, this is going to be a presentation by the Los Angeles Department of City Planning on the Plan for a Healthy Los Angeles, a health and wellness element of the general plan. Plan for a Healthy LA. Good evening.
Claire Bowen, I'm a senior planner with the Los Angeles Department of City Planning. It's wonderful to see you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Great. The city embarked on an update to the general plan a number of years ago, and it was the first time we were actually taking on the development of a health plan for the city. It's an opportunity to actually embed policies and goals in our general plan that really then set the direction for how the city is going to develop and make decisions about the growth of our city. So having a health plan as part of our general plan, I think, was a really key opportunity for us, and I'm glad we're having an opportunity to discuss it this evening. The plan was actually adopted on April 1st of this year, and I think you were all sent an electronic copy of it. I do have one physical copy, so if anybody would like it, first hand goes up, I'll hand it out. Okay, great. Susie, I'll give it over to you in a moment. The plan actually, the effort started in fall of 2012, and we really embarked on this plan because obviously today, given a lot of the discussion this evening, there's obviously a lot of renewed interest in understanding how planning and public health, or I guess there's a renewed interest in planning and public health as studies continue to link environmental, social, and economic conditions with health outcomes. There's a lot of factors that impact an individual's health. The built environment, as we've heard, obviously stress, the lack of social support, early child experiences, employment, housing, transportation, food environment, all these things can obviously impact an individual's health, obviously their income and education as well. So one of the first things we did when we started the health plan is we recognized that we did an actually kind of analysis, and I think there's a copy of the health atlases available online, because we recognized that while there's chronic health problems are a citywide problem, the health atlas found that many of the city's low-income communities face disproportionately higher rates of poor health outcomes and greater obstacles to achieving good health. So the health plan was really an opportunity for us to kind of take a snapshot of the city's kind of well-being and understand kind of where were the places in the city that had the greatest amounts of health disparities. And we certainly found that that it wasn't equal. There's places around the city that suffer from much greater disparities in terms of overcrowding or poverty. We found that Southeast LA, for example, has the greatest level of hardship, or that the prevalence of childhood obesity in Brentwood is only 11%, where in places like Boyle Heights and Harbor Gateway is over 30%. So this data helps us as a city be able to figure out where we're going to focus future resources. So one of the things that we're now doing that the health plan was, getting late. I'm not good with late hours. So one of the things the health plan is intended to do is, with this information, is hopefully set up policies that will help the city make decisions so we can improve health and wellness, and we can reduce disparities and poor health outcomes. Then we can improve collaboration and increase access to resources, reduce negative impacts, promote economic and social prosperity. So now that the plan's adopted, we actually don't have any specific staff in our department focused on this, but we are looking for opportunities to try to continue collaboration. We've incorporated or made a request in next year's budget for a housing and health unit, because obviously, as we've spoken this evening, there's a lot of correlation between housing and health. So hopefully having a couple of planners in our department focused on kind of the nexus between those issues. One of the other things I'm really excited to talk about this evening is an effort that we've been working on. Again, we don't really have any staff, but I was very fortunate this summer to have an intern join us from Scripps College, and who had a lot of interest in health. And she allowed us to focus on one of the key topics that was introduced in the health plan. There was a program that was noted by a number of our members of our Community Advisory Committee and our Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of city staff, that identified the potential need or the potential opportunity to maybe create healthy kid zones in the city, which we were really excited about that notion. And fortunately, the county also just finished, I think you guys are after me, as you're going to have a little presentation about the Community Health Improvement Plan. And actually one of the things that that plan also recognized was the importance of education and obviously focusing it again on healthy kid zones. So I've been actually talking with Gail Haberman in the county Department of Public Health, who actually was the leader of putting that CHIP plan together. And we've been having early conversations with LAUSD about their wellness centers, and we're starting to have some small early conversations about thinking about how we could maybe use these wellness centers to start to become the focal places for starting to have this conversation about healthy kid zones. Maybe you start to really focus then resources in those areas that not only you're already putting the focus on the wellness centers, but now you start to target more improvements around transportation, safe passages, great food, making healthy food policies, healthy food available. So we're really excited about that opportunity, because again, given that the communities where the wellness centers are already focused are already places that LAUSD has identified of areas in need, and so that this would allow the city to be able to start to focus again some of our very scarce resources in places where those efforts could have the biggest impact. So I'm really excited about the healthy kid zones, and we're going to just beginning to kind of define what that is, having some early conversations. I would look forward to coming back and sharing with you more as we start to kind of really develop, what this is, and then maybe it's an opportunity for some of our council people to direct us to start to have, more conversations around that.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. Again, it was the #1 kind of program that kind of filtered up in the discussions around the health plan. I'm also really excited that we have 2 new mobility planners that started this morning in our department. And again, as mentioned earlier today, there's obviously a lot of connection between access to transportation options and health. Obviously, if somebody can't get to a doctor's appointment, or you can't get from the hospital to the shelter, that's a problem. So we're really excited about it. And so again, even though mobility planners, there's an opportunity for us to cross back over into the health arena.
Very good. Colleagues? Yes, sir. Excuse me, yeah. I have just a couple of, I must admit, I didn't go through all 168 pages online, but I did read the introduction, and there were 2 things in there that I just wanted to clarify. One, it says, while the city does not provide direct medical services. Now, the fire department spends 85% of its time providing medical services, much of it related to the folks that have the housing issues. So, I mean, they transport 570 people a day to the hospital and respond close to 2,000 times. So just the city does, and it does interrelate to what we're talking about here in terms of poverty, homelessness, transportation. The other line I noted in there says the relationship between the Department of Public Health and the city is facilitated through a contractual agreement with the county. Now, I don't mean to harp on this, but I guess I am, because the issue has become how is our relationship with the county, and if there is in fact a contract, it would be useful to know what it is, because then you can see if you're performing
as that contract spells out. Thus far, I haven't seen a contract, and in a conversation with a member of the city attorney's staff, they weren't sure that there was one either. So since the statement was made in there, it would just be useful to know if there is in fact a contract between the county and the city to perform the services by the county on behalf of the city. So I mean, those may not be things that you're familiar, but they were in the introduction to the health plan, so I thought I'd raise it here just because I can.
Thank you.
I'd like to reiterate what the commissioner said, because I think that gets to the heart of what the purpose of this commission is to evaluate the effectiveness and efficiency of health or public health services in our city. So I would really urge whoever we need to talk to, we need this information. That's because right. We need to know where we need to start from. And just secondly, I just want to commend you on the quality of this report. I had a chance to read it when it first came out a few weeks back, and it's a well done, thoughtful report which gets to the heart of the social determinants of health that we really need to focus our efforts on. Medical services is just a small piece of this, and I would argue it's an insignificant piece when we talk about the health of our citizens. So.
Yes, go for it.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen, for taking time out of your evening to join us and enlighten us about this work. I had the opportunity to provide input during this plan process over the last 2.5 years, and I found the city staff very eager to learn from a wide variety of stakeholders, and the result is apparent in the construction of a very comprehensive document. And I guess my request to you is to continue to inform us about the priorities for implementation, so this commission can be useful in a functional way in elevating those opportunities to accelerate implementation, to accelerate progress, particularly on these complex intersections of, as Commissioner Sparks described, the social determinants of health. So we're here to help to try and move some of this forward and to try and put a spotlight where it's most useful. And if I extract correctly, I think I heard you indicate that it's timely for us to raise the possibility of whether we can be a useful partner in the discussion around the formation of healthy kid zones, what that looks like, what the specific actions are to bring that to life. We'd love to be able to be useful.
Great, and I appreciate it. And I look forward to having a conversation with you guys about healthy kid zones.
Thank you.
I think also you can also, as you mentioned, there's a lot of great data in this that really does speak to the health, to the number of disparities across the city and a number of issues. And so again, whether we're talking about transportation investments or housing investments, that the Health Atlas especially, gives us a lot of tools to be able to help the city direct its funds. And so to the extent that you use your position here on the commission to help continue to remind the city about the importance of looking at this data and making those decisions, based on data.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, this is Commissioner Vick. Again, just want to thank you for the report. It's beautiful. You definitely were speaking my language as a public health advocate and professional, so the maps and all of the data and the information about health equity and the social determinants of health, very valuable, very much speaking to my heart as to what I do for a living. And I'm really impressed that Chapter 1 was about health equity, and I do see the disparities in the health outcomes in different parts of the city. Wondering if there's something the Commission can do. I'm already thinking in my head, light bulbs are going off. Is there a need for a health equity subcommittee in this Commission, or is there other things that we could do? It sounds like you don't have a lot of staff or support, and I also would like to say I'm glad you're working with Gail and some of my colleagues at the Health Department.
Thank you for that comment. You want to respond, or?
Let's keep talking. Try to figure out an opportunity. I mean, with no staff right now, it's a little bit tricky. But and I am hoping, if we do get the housing and health unit next year's budget, that will help us to have a little bit more staff to be able to, think about more opportunities for engagement.
In collaborating with the health department at the county level, perhaps some of the regional offices, the area health offices that are located sort of, those 8 service planning areas. I know some of those areas have. Some of the city offices may be a potential point of contact for you for some of that assistance at the local level.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you all. for your comments. Now let's go to the public. H, against the proposal. Turn around your chair so you can hear it and respond to it.
Good evening. And Madam Speaker, as you brought out to our attention disparity, I talk about 42 U.S.C. 1981 section of equal rights under the law. Law that provides people who are homeless the wellness to eat, the wellness to benefit from programs, services, and activities that benefit all our lives. The American Disability Act. But with any regard to that, there are some in this city who discriminate against the homeless for their wellness. And it's sobering to me to know that people like Jose Huizar, who's the manufacturer of the genocide of homelessness in the city of Los Angeles, has created this. He parades around the Broadway, the Grand Broadway. Grand Broadway has become a desolated homeless land with no homeless people other than the ones you push out of that area to 5th and San Pedro. That is an embarrassment upon you, Jose Huizar, councilman of the 14th district, the asshole who put me in the street and made me homeless. Fuck you, Huizar, for that. But in regards to my complimentary issues for those who are homeless, I say to you, this advocate is not backing down from our local government. I will push the issues for wellness, eliminate the disregard for taking food away from homeless people, taking away homes from homeless people, and putting $100 million fucking dollars to the action of what is disparity in our society today, Jose Huizar. Thank you.
Thank you. Spindler W.
So the week after my illegal arrest, speaking of comments that goes around, it's on the website now because what happened was the police commission meetings, which I talked about homelessness, they finally put them up. So our good friend Steve Soboroff, the week after I was arrested, treated me, as you would suspect, the same way without any disregard. See, right now, it's on the website. You can look in the police commission meeting because. So that's Matt Johnson. So what I did was, as an example of an LAPD commission, I looked at how much money Steve Soboroff gave to campaigns since 1999, including running for mayor and giving campaign donations and funneling through his wife and his kids and the law partners with Matt Johnson, the new commission president. It's almost $1,100,000 of graft and campaign donations that have been dumped into this city. So it starts with the police. The most common encounter with homelessness will be the LAPD. Now, the problem is if you get assaulted by the police and you call the sheriff's department will not assume jurisdiction over what he referred to as 42 U.S.C. 1983, a civil rights violation, because it's federal law. So if you're homeless and you're inside the municipal corporate limits of the city of Los Angeles, you cannot call for sheriff's deputies to assist you when you're being abused by the Los Angeles Police Department. The Los Angeles Police Department is out of control. It is incapable of dealing with a face-to-face contact with homelessness, and they are not trained correctly. And this is one of the major reasons homelessness is a train wreck in L.A.
Thank you. Did we do General Jeff? Okay. General Jeff, you're up. Changed your name a little bit, but it's all the same.
Thank you. General Jeff, I first moved, I'm born and raised in the city of Los Angeles, and I reduced myself to a state of homelessness and moved to Skid Row in August of 2006. So I'm going on my 10th year in experiencing Skid Row. So I said all that to say, while I have not read the plan, a plan for a healthy LA, I would like to think that based on the presentation that I heard, what I didn't hear was that Skid Row was mentioned numerous times. Matter of fact, during the presentation just now, Skid Row wasn't mentioned once. And from my experience, it is impossible to have a healthy LA without having a healthy Skid Row. And so what does a healthy Skid Row look like? When we talk about people that are undernourished, severely undernourished, that means they lack the nutrients, they lack exercise, so that automatically that we need, where's in the plan, how are we going to get those nutrients to the people? Exercise, that starts with, physical fitness, exercise equipment. Instead of people laying around all day, there's nothing to do all day. Let's get some fitness equipment. I myself, in 2008, I created the Gladys Park Improvement Project. There are 2 city-owned parks in Skid Row. They're pocket parks, but Gladys Park and San Julian is the other. And so in that we were able to get Reckin Parks to use Quimby funds to get a couple of pieces of fitness equipment. So, just to lead by example. Now, if we're talking about city and county partnerships, let's come together with some fun and get some exercise and get some people to move around. Also in that said improvement plan, Nike and LE4 Foundation, donated a brand new full court basketball court. So, so to help support our Skid Row 3-on-3 Streetball League, which is a basketball league. So there's a lot of ways to look at creating a healthier Skid Row, which would then therefore help create a healthier LA. But it doesn't sound like we're in the report, so I can't wait to see the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian? Braha?
Well, basically it's simple. One of the topics I was reading in the document was your department on culture affairs. I think you understand about specifics of how do you educate a child, basically. What is the definition of a beautiful mind, a beautiful soul? Why is that so necessary now when you have things like pop culture or rap music? How does that destroy the child's mind to comprehend difficult conceptions of the human soul? So this is where my culture comes in. We know in this organization of ours, because our members engage the public, even children. We engage them on the cultural level of the classical art of Mozart and the best that humanity has. And what happens, what we found out is that the children, when they come out of their house, they go into the schools, and for some reason, they don't know what the hell's going on around them. We introduced music to them, as one of our members did. She began to sing. And the children, for some reason, something captured, something in them was alive. And this is what we're saying. If you really want to produce a culture, you have to introduce the spirit of the nature of the human soul, which is embodied in classical art. And I go back to something very, very specific. There's a tuning factor.
Appreciate your comments. Any other commissioner or anybody else from the public that hasn't submitted a card that wants to speak? Hearing that there is no more, thank you very much for your presentation and for everybody's interaction with it. Very grateful for it. Okay. And we got a verbal report by one of our commissioners, Andreas Taylor, on the Los Angeles County Community Health Improvement Plan.
Thank you. November 20th was when the county unveiled its Community Health Improvement Plan, and it was a plan that's also available online, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. Given the late hour and that we still have a number of additional agenda items, I just wanted to say that the county plan can help us in terms of working also with the city plan, which we just heard about, but to determine our, since our purpose is to determine the health needs of the city residents, as well as how those needs are being met. And there's a wealth of information in the Community Health Improvement Plan, and they have 3 different priority areas. One is to achieve equity and community stability, and that under that, their strategies include the availability of safe, quality, and affordable housing, which is one of the things we've been talking about, and also creating healthy and safe communities, and trying to work in collaboration instead of isolation of just one, just looking at one piece of the silo. So everything from reducing violence and traffic collisions and air pollution and the transmission of infectious diseases such as gonorrhea and HIV and TB as well. And then priority area 1 was to increase prevention to improve health, including prevention of chronic disease and including increased access to healthy food and to physical activity, for example, which was also mentioned, as well as access to care, both mental health as well as medical health. So I think that we should include looking at these kinds of resources.
And I agree with you on that, obviously.
Yeah, as we set our priorities, because we can't do it all, and we're going to need to have some priorities.
That's right. Colleagues, anybody want to comment on that?
I had the opportunity to attend the same meeting that Commissioner Taylor is describing. Learned extensively and was actually pleased to see a number of city department staff were represented there. So the collaboration between city and county was palpable, and it will be important for us to figure out which elements, parts of this very thick, exhaustive document are most applicable to the framework we adopt and probably be able to use to meet our goals and objectives much more quickly and seamlessly.
All sounds good to me. Any other commissioner want to comment on it? Can we go to the public? Okay, public. We're all the public, we're all connected. I mean, let's be straight about it. General Jeff, issues and solutions. And then Brian after that. Brian Bagarjar.
Thank you, President. General Jeff, Skid Row. In the mid-'70s, not really sure of the exact date, Los Angeles County played a part, while we're talking about LA County's health improvement plan. LA County in the mid-'70s helped to create the Skid Row Containment Zone policy. That was a policy that was created. And basically what that is it basically created an area where the homeless and mentally ill could go. They said it was because it was created back by then Governor Ronald Reagan. And so then when Ronald Reagan shut down the state-run mental institutions, the mentally ill were let to go free and roam the streets. So ultimately they created a Skid Row Containment Zone policy to kind of corral the mentally ill in one specific area. And Skid Row exists to this day, as many of you know. So Skid Row is known as the homeless capital of America. So that makes it the homeless capital of California and obviously the homeless capital of the city of Los Angeles. And if we're talking about improving the health in the city of Los Angeles, we have to look at and revisit that Skid Row Containment Zone policy, because as far as I know, it's still on the books. So how can Skid Row be deemed a healthy community where we're looked at a containment zone, basically a wasteland. So that's why, us, myself, and many other residents, we're in the process of creating the Skid Row Neighborhood Council to try to redefine what Skid Row is. And we're proud Skid Row residents. We want to turn this around and from within. So as we turn around, we need that support. But we're not even included in any of these plans. So people don't even know.
I know my colleagues do here as well.
As you do, as you always have, and we have much respect for what you do, Bill, and to this. We miss you here, absolutely. So, but in terms of LA County's improvement plan and the city's, healthy LA, Skid Row, where's our efforts? They're positive. We, in the Skid Row area, there's, if I may conclude, the community residents, we started a positive movement in Skid Row in 2007, and we aren't documented anywhere. We have many grassroots organizations that we're trying to be part of the process.
And we got a serious problem in Venice as well, where there's a sizable amount of folks on the street who don't even get processed into the system. They're just out on the street. But I appreciate your comments and how you said it as well. Okay, the next person is going to be Brian
Barajas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good, Brian.
Thank you. And to you, sir, as it said, great, 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 great. All right. Now I want to clarify, is this item 11, just to clarify? 7? Okay. Oh, well, okay, health improvement plan. Okay. All right, fine. No, well, I mean, I guess just to make it clear, any activities that you're struggling with to enhance, everything depends on, obviously, what is your understanding and of the situation, but also what are the limits that you have to overcome within yourself in order to get what you need to provide for these people, whoever they are. Federal government, again, I need to emphasize to all of you, without a federal government, you cannot create the facilities that you know must be created in order to support the people that you know are on the verge of death, literally. So I just want to make that clear, and we'll move on.
Thank you. Wayne Spidler?
So we're just trying to clarify something here.
Yes, somebody said that Soboroff is an asshole, and I can't agree with that. I mean, I can't agree with that. He's a Nazi, but not an asshole. So, firearms vendor permits. Why don't you sell the guns?
Can I ask you why you keep talking about Nazis and swastikas and Heil when 6 million people were annihilated? Just tell me where it comes to you to stand there and Heil Hitler and wear a swastika and talk about Nazis. What is you?
So as you see, that was during a public comment. This person calls me out and says I'm wearing a swastika. That's what I'm talking about. This is this is what they do to public speakers. And this was the week after my false arrest. So I'm going to keep going back there. Tomorrow there's another meeting. I'm coming back to that scumbag tomorrow, and the rest of them, Black Lives Matters will be there. And we're going to keep going to these meetings until they stop shooting black kids because they're in redevelopment zones. And before they stop taking the homeless people and pushing them out of areas so they can redevelop those areas. Because this is all about redevelopment money. You see the places the homeless used to be, now they're hotels. Well, first you got to get rid of them. And then another thing they do is rent-controlled housing. They force them out of rent-controlled housing. And then they flip them around and put them into non-rent-controlled housing. So the homeless get caught in the middle between this tension between development and funding for budgets. And that's why we have to take the homeless and get them out of the middle of the crossfire. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we have H.
hyperlink towards a community health improvement plan. But I'm talking about a formula of grants that allow programs and projects under 42 U.S.C. 10406, that nothing in this paragraph of the law shall be construed to supersede any provisions of any federal and state protection when it comes to health improvements. You heard today the General's very basic comments, needs and wants of a social community such as what we have off of 5th and San Pedro. But no one in the city like Herb Wesson, the little Napoleon man with Napoleon syndrome, dares to step up and say to Mr. General, let me work with you to do better. But this commission can do better because your numbers outweigh one little Napoleon named Herb Wesson. You hear me, Herman? Do you hear me? I'm exercising my First Amendment right under the Constitution of the state of California to exercise my disapproval of you causing an improvement plan that does not work with federal and state dollars. But you and Mr. Weezar continue to take away the provisions and deny by federal and state dollars our protection as brought out by the speakers before me. Because I'm not going to stand here and lollygag with you, Herman, because tomorrow maybe there might be a better action regarding this formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of the moment of verbal comment. Now let's talk about introduction of a resolution on homeless housing. Okay, we're going to read it into the record right now.
Okay, Commissioner Shannon, I'm going to read into the record the resolution that's up for consideration today. It's a resolution expressing support for housing for health within the Los Angeles homeless population, December 14th, 2015. Whereas 25,686 people are homeless in the city of Los Angeles, 17,687 of which are unsheltered, and whereas homelessness can be a cause and result of serious health issues, often detracting from regular medical attention, access to treatment, and recuperation. And whereas a study conducted by Michael Quaisenu, I hope I'm saying that name right, Associate Professor of Preventive Medicine at the Keck School of Medicine of USC, found that the total cost of public services spent on 4 individuals during 2 years living on the streets in Los Angeles was $187,288, a cost which dropped by more than $20,000 per person during 2 subsequent years spent in stable permanent housing. And whereas the New England Journal of Medicine published a study concluding that homeless people spent an average of 4 days longer per hospital visit than comparable non-homeless people. And whereas a study of hospital admissions of homeless people in Hawaii revealed that 1,751 adults were responsible for 564 hospitalizations and $4 million in admission costs, which estimates that the excess cost for treating these homeless individuals was $3.5 million. And whereas the County of Los Angeles Housing for Health program has been successful in housing over 1,000 people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles through a combination of housing programs, including a flexible subsidized housing pool. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Los Angeles Health Commission supports the Housing for Health model as one critical step toward addressing the health and mental health care needs of the City of Los Angeles homeless population, as well as the public health of the community. And therefore, be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Mayor of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles City Council. Authored by Susie Shannon, Health Commissioner, submitted by Bill Rosendahl, LA Health Commissioner President, Susie Shannon, LA Health Commissioner First Vice President, and Matthew Sharp, LA Health Commissioner Second Vice President. So I'd like to enter that with a motion to accept this resolution.
I'll second that motion.
And obviously I'm in favor of it.
Can I just, his pronunciation is Cousineau, Dr. Cousineau.
Dr. Cousineau.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah, do we want to have a discussion, folks, at this point, or are we ready to wait until the next meeting?
No, all in favor. I think we can vote.
Okay, let's vote. All those in favor of this? Yes? Aye.
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 Okay.
Any objections?
Any objections? So be it.
Abstentions. You have to ask for abstentions.
What?
You have to ask for abstentions.
Do we have anybody use what?
Abstentions.
Abstaining. Nobody is abstaining? Okay. So, let's
Thank
go.
you.
Okay.
Public comment.
Now we're back to public comment. We obviously have some of our friends in the community that have been here all night, and I appreciate you being here and things that you have said and added to it, okay? What's that, Susan?
Okay, you can move on to the public.
I can go with it. Okay. H, you're up again. As you were against proposal. I don't know what the proposal is to be against at this point.
Well, isn't it obvious? The deprivation of homes to homelessness is a real serious problem. Are we going to put up the fight, as I call it, the crisis on homelessness, the war on homelessness, on those people who the city of Los Angeles has violated their civil rights to a home, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their disability, but fully and inappropriately, you, Herb Wesson, and your crony friends with one Nuri Grande have foolishly done wrong on behalf of the public's interests by denying people a home, a very basic life in a home. But for those of you who have a home and can sit there on Merry Christmas Day and say Merry Christmas, you can't imagine the words that would come followed by what I'm thinking. But I hold back. I hold back because there's reason. And that reason is one of you today might be a part of that issue that involves, if I can save the world, I will save one human being. That's in the Jewish Holocaust Museum. On your way out, read it and apply it. Because if you got enough testicle and hormone like me and the other individuals who stayed here tonight to discuss the matters of our fellow human beings, our homeless population, then you will have more respect rather than look at us as being, as Steve Soboroff put us, Nazis. Nazis kill people. People advocate to save other people.
Thank you. Appreciate your comment. Stephen David Simon. He left. He left. Stephen David. Okay. Then we have W. Spindler again. There he is.
And you know, Sheila Kuehl wants everybody to listen.
Asshole! I am a Jew. My mother was a Jew. I don't get it. I have to talk. I have to talk. I want order in here, and I would order you call me.
That's right. He wanted the floor. And that's what it is. That's public comment. That's democracy. That's what it looks like. See, and all of these little puppets, like up there at the top, you see the little puppet up there with the little mustache. Even when he's not here, Herb Wesson Jr. presides over all of us here in the Horseshoe. He's probably got a little camera in there, and he's probably at home right now, and his little camera zooming in. So if you're watching Herb Wesson, there you go. That's for you, and that's for your buddy Steve Soboroff, because there's probably a little camera in there. Imagine the ego of a man that has to have a little miniature puppet of himself at the podium. That's not a man who's humble. That's a dictator. Charlie Chaplin, little dictator. But the difference is that Charlie Chaplin was excommunicated from this country and was not allowed to return for almost 40 years until he received an honorary Oscar. That's the kind of man that America produced. But what we're producing now are people without jobs. There are no jobs. Homelessness. When you don't work, you don't make money. And when you don't make money, you can't pay the rent. So what do? You live in your car. You become homeless. So we need jobs. We need jobs. They want to give $100 million to homelessness. The DWP just gave $266 million of our ratepayer money to the city. Dump it all into homelessness right now.
Okay. And now, you guys got something right behind you. It's for item number 9.
Okay, so it's discussion on the establishment of subcommittees.
That's what we have as number 9. We do also have an introduction of a resolution on homeless housing.
No, we just did that. We just did that and it passed.
Okay.
Right here.
Yeah, item number 9. Discussion of the establishment of subcommittees. Colleagues, you want to comment on that? Say anything about it at this point?
I would actually.
Go for it.
So I think part of this, Commissioner Shannon, for folks listening online, I think for the establishment of the subcommittees, there are a number of ways that we can look at this. Part of it is just the experience of the members, I think, on this commission, which is rather extensive. But we have, I think, a number of ways that we can look at this. One would be to look at subpopulations, for instance, the homeless community, LGBT community. We could look at this also from mental health community, and so we could create subcommittees based on specific subpopulations. We could also create geographic communities or committees to deal with specific community access based on geography. And so I would just sort of throw it out there that we be creative in terms of sort of assessing these needs, and then hopefully what I had envisioned was that the subcommittees would feed then into the specific writing of those sections of the annual report. And I don't think we have to have exactly all of the answers necessarily today, but I think it would be good for us to be thinking along those lines and maybe begin creating our subcommittees now so that we can start meeting and start looking at what the structure is that we want for those specific areas of our annual report.
Comments, colleagues?
Dr. Mandel, I'd be opposed to subcommittees that were based upon geography. I think one of the reasons we all come together is to try to have one LA. And I think that the subcommittees could focus more on patient variations. So, for example, one would be more of a public health-oriented issue. One would be more of an acute problem. And then there'd be other areas that we should look at, which is the city's response to, say, bioterrorism and the healthcare reactions of that. So I think we can look at the areas in health that interact from the city's point of view as opposed to the county. So we're not really looking at hospitalization versus outpatient, but we're looking at more patient variation. So, for example, one would be chronic care. One would be acute care. One would be problems like bioterrorism. One would be public health prevention. and there's possibly others that might be a specific concern for the commission itself.
Very articulate.
This is Commissioner Vick. I strongly recommend a subcommittee on health equity. I guess in a sense it would deal with the geographic issue. Maybe if some people want to deal with that in that respect, looking at the disparities between certain communities and why maybe one part of the city has high rates of obesity and others don't, and how we can learn from some of them best practices. So I strongly suggest a health equity subcommittee focused and grounded in the social determinants of health.
It's a good idea. Anybody disagree or somebody else want to comment?
If I may,
Please.
Dr. Mandel talks about divisions along or attacks on the problem along various lines, and I would tend to concur with that. For example, mental health is another area that we're woefully short of resources in the city and the county in acute management of mental or long-term and acute management of mental illness. So that would be, I think, an area of concern. Another one would be emergency medical services as an issue of particular interest to mine. But it is one area where the city of Los Angeles actually does provide health care, and it varies across the city, and it certainly, in a sense, homelessness exacerbates that a lot. And so the question about resources and all that, I think, would be one to take a look at, and how that resource is allocated and the costs and so on.
It's a good point.
Commissioner Sharp would like to lift up a suggestion I think Commissioner Esparza raised a month ago, which is the value of establishing some sort of framework through which to look at this. I think everyone has raised a really valid lens to consider health, and it seems to me that recognizing the resource constraints of what I assume are a number of very busy people around that is here, that it would be most helpful if in the interim between today and our next gathering after the holidays, if there was a couple people who would be able to convene in some sort of ad hoc subcommittee to develop the right framework that would help us approach each of these subject areas with some consistency. And whether that is to choose a data-driven approach, to choose a best practices project model approach, to choose a what's timely here at City Hall approach. There's several different lenses, all of which I genuinely think are sort of valid. And I think that would help us look at each of the subject and issue areas with a consistent lens. Otherwise, I think the challenge in other processes I've been involved in the past is that a number of folks break up into clusters to try and work out something and come out with apples, oranges kinds of examinations. And so I think a first step might be to see if a small group could frame a logic model of sorts that could be applied to each of the other subject areas in a way that would be consistent.
Appreciate that.
To which end I nominate Commissioner Esparza to convene such subcommittees, since it was your idea.
Everybody's giggling around the table with a half a smile and half a frown. Well, it all seems to make sense. First, that is, we have to stick together and we have to lay out the various strategies that there are that the city and the county can do. The bottom line is, without the state and the federal government, we can't do much of anything. Because the city doesn't have this kind of money, nor the county. And the fact is, it comes from the state and the federal government. We're the ones who get it, and we use it. Somebody has to use it. The city and the county does. So we need a city-county strategy that dovetails with state money and federal money. That's really the bottom line in all of this. Anybody else want to comment on that? Or can I take that as our first resolution, that as a group, we agree that we can find solutions, but we have to bring in the state and the federal government, because they're our main funding sources. We don't have the money, the city. I know the county doesn't have the money either. And obviously, I know the state and the federal government is where the money comes from, which means it comes from the people through those two strategies there. give you time to think about it, and when we have our next board meeting, we can actually put some things down on paper, unless you want to do it now. What's the feeling of the commission? Yes, sir.
I'm not opposed to doing that, but I think it's hard to wordsmith something in this venue. I think, again, a small group of people should put together some kind of a document that frames an approach. And again, let's think about it, and by the next meeting, I hope at least 2 or 3 more of you will consider working with me to put a framework together. Matthew, I'd sure like for you.
I look forward to that, being part of it.
And the same with your suggestion, President, is just that I think we just need to take it in and then put a small group of people together to put some kind of a draft document.
Yep, and we know we need the support of the state and the federal government.
Correct.
And we don't have that online right now. That's something that will help us get things done. Doesn't resolve it all, but it makes a bigger step in the direction we all want, which is resources to start dealing with the issue of homelessness and poverty and all the other aspects that we talked about tonight. And I believe that if we do it that way, we'll come up with some strategies and some more support, especially from the state and federal government. I mean, it's absurd that they're not sitting in the room with us right this moment, which frankly they should be, because it's the resources of the people that goes through the process of the federal, state, and then it goes to the county and the cities together. So if we can kind of build that in our own minds, then we can have another meeting as a group or as a smaller group, and then as the real commission, and lay it out to all of us. This is what we're thinking. How do we feel about that? I see a few eyes bumping nicely over this.
Okay,
People in
so,
the audience too. Yeah, come see, come saw. Can we make it happen or not? We're all challenged by that. Everybody in the room is. So we're all together on that. But let's get some legs on it. Let's get the feet working in the right way. And let's get us as a commission providing some real support to the notions of homelessness and health quality for everybody, for God's sake. If I could use that as a close, I'd like to say this motion that we're all together on this, and those who haven't been on a subcommittee, you have an opportunity now to be on a subcommittee, and then we'll have our next pre-commission meeting, and then our commission meeting in the next year. Shortly after the first of the year, we'll move in that direction. Everybody seems to be okay with that? With that in mind, go ahead, Susie.
Okay, Commissioner Shannon, I will pass along a piece of paper just for people to sign up if they'd like to be on the framework committee, and then we can go from there.
Great. And while you're doing that, can I also ask for a motion to adjourn? We were motion, and do we have a second?
Second. We still have another agenda.
Item? There's still one more item on the agenda.
Wait a minute, one more item.
Actually, there's 2 items. Still on.
I can take this. You want me to take that?
Yeah, take that one. Item number 10 is a process discussion on attending county meetings. I'm not big on that, to be candid with you. But
Yeah, we'll do public comment too. There's a public comment for number 9. Okay.
Okay.
So we have to do that first.
Okay, let's do our public comment for number 9. H, who's against the proposal. Then we have Bill or W against proposal.
Woo, time runs so fast here.
Brian
Runs so fast.
is
The
our
controller
also,
of this clock runs the clock so fast here.
and then,
But in the disparity of time regarding this discussion on the establishment of subcommittees, I oppose. I oppose because I think all of you as a committee can work together as a whole better than subbing it out to each other's individually without this transparency. The city of Los Angeles practices its body of illegal activity by not being transparent. So don't work in their action. Show us what you guys can do as a body now when you make a decision. If you can't, then put it on hold and bring it back to the next meeting so the public can have input. Or maybe you can weigh and balance, check and balance it to see if you all can come to a census of an agreement. Because, again, it is we the people, this legislative body, that holds you accountable for your actions to make us accountable as tax rate payers to gain from the position you put us in. Not to go behind closed doors like you, Herman, Herb Wesson, the little Napoleon who hides behind closed doors. Because I will bring back to you, Herman, my one and only good friend, Mr. B, to bitch regarding this committee. But so far, this committee has been good, Herb, because they have not interrupted me in public comment time the way you do.
Appreciate that. That was Mr. H, according to the book. Then we have Spindler, W. Here he comes.
Yes, Mr. President, take down that puppet. Take down that little Herb Wesson puppet off of that mantle. It doesn't belong here. Herb Wesson does not run commission meetings, but he leaves it there to remind everybody who the gangster is, who the campaign donations funnel through, who assigns committees to the city council. It's that evil little puppet, Herb Wesson Jr. But Herb Wesson Jr. is being puppeted by others. Eli Broad, Steve Soberoff, former Mayor Reardon, General Motors, Hilton Hotels. All of these people are conduits to use the city council to gain more for them and the 1%, while the 99% rot in hell. So that's why subcommittees don't work. You get into little groups, you get invited to play golf at LA Country Club, and the next thing you know, you'll do anything that little worm tells you to do. Because there's nothing better than being invited to LA Country Club to play that golf course. You'll do anything. I got to play it one time. And you'll do anything if you get to play on LA Country Club, and Herb Wesson Jr. can give any of you the full tour as long as you'll do what you're told to do. And that's why resist temptation. Resist the temptation to break up into groups. Sit here, iron it out, hand it to Herb Wesson, and tell him the DWP money now belongs to the homeless. $267 million, we're seizing it, and we're giving it to homelessness. Go to hell, Herb Wesson. It's ratepayer money. It's Bill Rosenthal's money now.
What do we have up next? General Jeff.
Good evening, Commission. I approve of the subcommittee ideal, because that's pretty much where the work gets done, and this is where it gets approved and shared with the public. I just want to say that as human beings, we adapt to our environment. And so, if the city creates deplorable conditions, we're going to develop deplorable human beings. And it's the obvious, the opposite on the other end of the spectrum. And so in Skid Row, the city has combined to create deplorable conditions, and therefore we're creating deplorable human beings. We must take the health and wellness of each and every human being into consideration, and Angelino as well. And so when Commissioner Vick talks about creating the subcommittee on health equity, that's very important. So I just want to take the rest of my remaining time to throw out some topics that may be of interest. Oh, and also a point, when they talk about housing, when it comes to homelessness, I don't understand why they try to put housing first. Housing and services should be equal because it doesn't make sense. You can't put one before the other. Other topics, we have to, in order to have a healthy LA, we have to do something about people that are suffering from extreme poverty. We have to focus on food ingredients. What type of nutrients are we putting into our bodies or lack thereof? Air and water. What are we breathing? When was the last time we really looked at a report? Is the air really healthy? This is a health commission. Is the air we're breathing healthy? I know we used to be very, very smoggy in LA. Exercise. You know, we're talking about the city's bidding on the Summer Olympics in 2024. What condition are the Angelinos in to actually be healthy enough in terms of exercise? Also, transportation, and most importantly, education is a subcommittee that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Brian? I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Brian.
Yeah, it's Barajas. Yeah. So anyways, as I heard that it's a good idea, I think if you're considering the fact that the federal government always supports its states. It's a federal government. We are a United States. If people cannot comprehend that idea, you're running into a problem because the mind comprehends all aspects that has to deal with your situation, which means if you're going to create a subcommittee that would be a so-called way to bring and awaken the federal government to these realities, I think what has to occur with these subcommittees is, well, it's sort of like creating the United States again, actually. You're going to have a Treasury Department within this subcommittee. That Treasury Department will facilitate the credit that needs to be had, that the federal government needs to create for the state and the cities within that. But it has to come from a federalized report that would support such a measure that you're seeking. So I emphasize, if you would like the credit that would support the measures that are required in order to support the activities that you need to be, again, the word would be create a federalized credit, which would actually guarantee that you'll have the support, the backing of the federal government in terms of what's called a federal constitution, what's called a credit system. The money is there. The question is, why are we giving all that money to bankers?
Spandler W. Sorry? You spoke already.
Well, if I'm bipolar, though, then I get 4 minutes, right? Okay, because that's what Steve Soboroff said. I had a mental problem, so. Okay, so I don't get the extra 2 minutes. Then Steve Soboroff was wrong. I'm mentally normal. Thank you.
Item number 10, which is process discussion on attending county meetings.
Commissioner Shannon, this is just a housekeeping item. We are tasked, obviously, with attending county meetings that are related to health issues. And so we thought maybe the best way to proceed forward would be to create a Google document that could be shared among the commissioners so that we can begin entering in those meetings, and then commissioners can let us know which ones they plan to attend. And that just seems like the best way to move forward. And I know a lot of you know maybe many meetings that some other folks don't know, and so it just seems like it's the best way to consolidate all of that information into one document.
I think this Taylor, I think we need to look at how many meetings are we talking about, because it says all meetings, and maybe that's not realistic, and particularly if there's no staff for the commission, we need to know what does all mean, and if that needs to be modified, that may need to be modified, because otherwise, we're not going to be in compliance.
Yeah, I think as we populate the document, we'll have a good idea of what we're looking at.
Please, whoever else wants to speak, commissioners.
I have a question perhaps for City Clerk regarding a very mundane matter, which is whether there's any identification available to us as commissioners to attend any of these meetings to establish our veracity as an actual representative of this commission. Is there any sort of card or badge or anything of that sort that might be available? Because it's a unique assignment this commission has to be outside City Hall representing the commission, and so that may be a tool that would facilitate this going a little easier.
We're going to do all that. Oh, God.
Even within City Hall.
My manager is not here, but that's something that we can work with you on. That's something that we have to do administratively.
Okay, we're back to public comment.
Question, if I might.
Please.
Commissioner Shannon was saying that somebody was going to generate a list. I wasn't sure who was doing that.
I can create I can create the Google Doc, the Google document, as a shared document so that we can all populate the meetings and people can, I think once I send it out, you'll see sort of what the framework is.
We have
and
to
then
be
you
careful
can,
of the Brown Act on how that's done.
yeah, and that can be a public document. There's no reason why that is not a public document, by the way. The meetings that we're attending should be public, so that's not an issue.
Okay, I just want to make sure as we're
Yeah.
doing that because they went through all that last time. Okay. Because there were a few of those commissions were cited in the CAO's document setting this up, and I don't know if that was an exhaustive list or an but anyway, just presumably you'll work off that and others. Okay.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment? Okay, now we got the LA City Health Commission as the concept of us, and this is from General Jeff, Issues and Solutions. General Jeff, last comment of the night.
Thank you, President Bill Rosendahl. You're right at home. When we're talking about attending county meetings, again, as I said, I'm the chair of the LA County Health Agency, IAB, that's the Integrational Advisory Board's Subcommittee on Homelessness, and next Tuesday, December 22nd at 6 p.m. at the James Wood Community Center in Skid Row, we're going to have a joint meeting. That's the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee and the said Subcommittee on Homelessness, and I invite each and every one of you to fulfill this obligation to attend commission meetings and community meetings. We can do both at once. That will be December 22nd, 6 p.m. in Skid Row. Thank you.
Thank you for that. H.
Do persons at the county level have the capacity as individuals to control themselves, such as Sheila, who used the obscenity of assholes to Hollywood Highland John Walsh, confidential? I find that abusive. Abusive among those who are pronounced mentally challenged, invisibly disabled, and as the other a-hole, Mr. Soberoff, who insults people by arresting them. Doesn't that give you a particular idea of how local government is becoming the G of LA, the gangsters of Chicago of old. We wouldn't have such conditions if corruption, waste, and abuse and fraud were not so turbulent today. It's almost like going to Mexico and coming here, escaping the cartels of you, Mitch Englander. Vote no for county supervisor Mitch Englander, because if you look at any videos of city meetings, he's never in his seat. He's never in his seat. And yet he wants you to support him as a county supervisor who cares a rat's ass about a homeless person on our street today. Vote no, county supervisor, the elf, you, Mitch Englander, you little crybaby. Wah. I used to be a reserve officer. Wah. I used to do good things for the public. Wah. All you are is a whimpering little punk, and you shouldn't become a big boy in the big role of the county supervisor like Sheila made the comment about the assholes.
Well, now we got one more. Wayne from
Yes, I know you're scared now.
Wayne from Encino. That's how they got you listed.
That's it?
That's all it says on the card.
Yeah, that's what it says.
That's what.
Yes. So I showed you the gangster, Sheila Kuehl. I know you're scared. John Walsh that had to stand up to her.
Listen, you asshole! I am a Jew. My mother was a Jew. I don't get it.
That's right. You got to fight for your right to talk, and that's why the commissioner over there wants to populate a Google document because he's too scared to go to a Brown Act sanctioned meeting and attend the meeting. You just walk in there, just like I do. You'll get arrested. It's okay. You'll get accosted by sheriff's deputies. It's okay. Because once they go up and grab you, you hand out your business card and go, sorry, shit, I'm on the LA City Commission. I'm a commissioner, and I want to talk to the district attorney now for your illegal arrest. And then they'll leave you alone. But the members of the public can't. I know you're scared of Sheila Kuehl, and I know you're scared of Mark Ridley Thomas, who's the MTA chairman who accosted me, threw me out of the MTA board meeting the other day because I used a profane word. I simply described what he is, and it's true, but he throws me out anyway. So I know you're afraid to go to the meetings. Go to the meetings. Tell them you need the money. Tell them they're a bunch of gangsters. Tell them they have the $100 million. Get the money. Take a bag with you and get the checks and bring it back here and get these homeless off the streets. You got to fight for these people, not beg. Fight.
That's it. Is anybody else out there? We're done.
Okay, now we just have this, which is items for future discussion.
Yeah. That was item 10. This is
see a card for you.
items for future discussion. Is what item 11 is.
Commissioner Shannon, this is a question that keeps coming up in terms of the relationship between the city and the county and any contractual relationship that's there. And so I think for a future agenda item, particularly in January, we should consider asking our city controller, Ron Galperin, to come and give a presentation on what those contracts are and
Good idea.
any financial relationship between the city and county.
It's a great idea. I second that. Let's move with that. Let's have him come before us and talk to us about how he views the county and the city and the issues that we as a constituent of this great nation, state, and county have to deal with. And he is a broad-based elected politician who moved on to that position. So I think it's a good idea to invite him, Susie. But let's just do this one now and get it over with adjourn the meeting. Oh, yeah, of course. Before I go to the public, any other commissioners that want to make some comments right now or have some ideas to add to the mix of which right now is huge and very difficult to know where it's all going to go? Please.
The next meeting would be 2 weeks from now would be, I think, the 28th, and
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I
Excuse
was going to say, we're not doing that, are we?
The second,
Once a month. We meet once a month.
yeah,
That's right, it's Wednesday.
January
I
11.
was moving those 2 weeks, that's right. Beg your pardon.
January 11 will be your next meeting.
So, okay, first.
That's okay.
This is Commissioner Vick. Someone mentioned the fire department is providing health care. I'd be interested in hearing about that. I saw a Facebook post by Councilmember Marquise Harris-Dawson about the nurse practitioners that are providing care in some way. I would like to hear more about that.
I agree with you. Let's ask the fire department to come before us.
I can reach out.
And he will reach out to them. And we'll invite them to make a presentation to us. We'll give them time at the first meeting to bring out their plan if they'd like to, and then we'll listen to them at our commission board meeting.
Another process suggestion, given that it's after 8:15, we've been here over 3 hours, I would suggest, again, because I think we have to do all this in public, that we choose at the beginning of the next meeting to structure public comment in one of two ways. Either that each public comment on the agenda items, we had 11 tonight, be either 1 minute, or that the comments be expected to be pertained to the agenda item. Yeah, I mean, it's a proposal for discussion in the next meeting in terms of trying to maximize the use of everyone's time who's here as a volunteer commissioner. I'd like us to at least discuss how to better manage our 3-hour.
Well, we're hearing boos from the public, and we have our commissioners pretty much saying, sounds like a good idea. So let's go through this set of comments on our motion at the moment, okay? Give you a shot. H, you go first.
Well, member, I'm part of the booing along with Mr. Rosendahl, because one thing that we don't have in common is that the public wishes to be heard within an amount of time that is reasonable, doesn't violate any unconstitutional right, and reflects our civil rights to protest and oppose and object. But when you turn your back to me, then I might get louder because I might suffer from post-traumatic stress, whatever bullshit. Who knows? Or my invisible disability, who knows? Or maybe I have AIDS, who knows? But the fucking problem today is people should be heard. This is not a racist, fascist, closed session meeting for 1 fucking minute like you do, Herb Wesson, you little fucking Napoleon. I object. Public comment should be open so that we can delegate business of the people for every fucking reason we believe is constitutionally correct, politically fucking right, and not objective to any criticism for 1 fucking minute. So I'm not mad, but this is how I exercise the decorum of what you call constitutional. But the state law forbids you, under the Brown Act, to take this criticism to heart. Nothing's perfect. It's a fucked up society. That's why there's homeless people on the street today. That's the reason why they don't come into here and protest like I do. Because I know right from wrong, wrong from right. Know how politicians dip their hands into the wallets of every constituent in the city of Los Angeles. In so many words, I demand 2 minutes, and I object to you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay. And then we have Wayne from Encino. And I might just say up front that I have always believed in the 2 minutes for the public and for the council members, whoever else is in the discussion, because sometimes it gets confusing and crazy, and a person needs 2 minutes to lay it out. So we can play this through the next board meeting, but frankly, my personal feeling is 2 minutes is fine with me, okay? Well, I just want to say...
That's right. The lady commissioner just came up across me and told me to get my fucking head straight. She wants me to get my head straight. My head's on straight. I survived the 13 and a half hours of Charlie Beck, white man over there that wants to limit us to 1 minute, because you don't want to be uncomfortable. You don't want to listen to me. You don't want to listen to a black man, a Latino, another Latino. You don't want to listen to us. How many Asians are on the panel? How many Asians are on the panel? You got Koreans that are homeless. You got Chinese Americans that are homeless. You got Hmong refugees that are homeless after they run out of their benefits. Nobody talks about that. You know why the Asians come over here? You know why they're homeless? Because we fucking bombed Vietnam and carpet-bagged it over a fake false incident in the Tonkin Gulf. You don't talk about that. What about the Japanese internment camps? You don't talk about that. Do you ever sit here and give a moment of silence for those people deported from the United States because they wouldn't give a second oath of allegiance to the United States because we were at war? So some didn't want to be detained. They went back and were deported to Japan. A lot of them had kids. One of them came back here, born in Japan. Ronald Inohara became an immigration judge. His mother and father were deported. You know why? They didn't want to give an oath of allegiance to the United States because they're going to be detained. So they said, fuck you, deport me back to Japan. And they took their chances. It's people that stand up for other people. Get off your duff. Wall Street's going to go broke. They're going to bail in the banks. And all of your little mortgages and all your little bank accounts are going to be IOUs. I own my home. I don't have no IOU on my house.
Okay, thank you for that. And it appears our last comment is from Guy in Breregan. There you go, Brian. I apologize for my mispronunciation.
No problem. It's nothing at all. Anyways, let's just focus on the real issue at hand. I think that the future discussions that need to be had would pertain to how do you actually put an implementation right now. What do you have to initiate in order to, again, resolve the crisis? A lot of people don't understand that under modes of crises, you have to conduct your activities in such a way that you have to go literally above and beyond in order to come back to the reality. As Spindler made clear, Wall Street is kaput. The problem is our laws do not protect us because they were removed by those entities. We go back to the law. What I stated was the Glass-Steagall Act. Go with the FDR approach, top down. If you do not, you're going to commit a crime against humanity, and I do mean it is a crime that even I don't think God can forgive his children if they tolerate a Nazi program, or worse than Nazi program, under this administration called Obama. So going back to the subject, we need the Glass-Steagall law. Separate and shut down the fictitious program of Wall Street. It's attached to everything that it is attached to. You could say it's worse than 2008 because now it's just everywhere.
Okay, we appreciate that. Thank you for your comments, my fellow commissioners and the public that spoke. the staff that presented before us, and the comments that they got involved with us in working for the future commission meetings and topics that we need to discuss. Anybody else want to make a last comment?
Well, I think in general, we're commissioners and we serve the public, and I agree with our president that we keep our public comments at 2 minutes.
Okay. Please. Yes.
Yes, Commissioner Ariola, I agree. 2 minutes, 1 minute, it's okay. I understand that people need to make their statements and we need to listen. But I do think, and I agree with Commissioner Sharp, that we should have testimony relative to the item before us. That's only going to help us make decisions.
I agree.
Commissioner
Everybody else
Jimenez,
agrees.
I want to support also Commissioner Sharp in that the comments should be pertinent to the item of discussion.
That's a good point too, and that's the way it should be and will be as we move forward. Any other comments from anybody else?
Wish everybody happy holiday.
Happy holidays. Hanukkah's just ended, and now we're going into the Christmas holidays. So let's enjoy our moments with family and friends, and let's make a difference with our souls and self as the community and our lives continue to be what it is. Motion to adjourn? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Okay, everybody. Meeting's adjourned.